The billionaire's lips were still warm against hers when Emily realized she'd just made the worst mistake of her life. $1,000. That's what they'd paid her to humiliate Lucas Blackwood in front of Manhattan's elite. But he wasn't pulling away. His hand was on her waist, possessive, dangerous, and the entire ballroom had gone silent. This wasn't supposed to happen. She was supposed to grab the cash and disappear. Instead, she just dragged herself into the world of a man who never forgave, never forgot, and apparently never let go. If you want to see how this impossible story ends, stay until the very last word. And please, hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. The kiss that destroyed everything. Emily Carter's hands were shaking, and it wasn't from the cold. The Ashford Hotel ballroom was overheated, packed with bodies in designer gowns and custom tuxedos. The kind of people who spent more on a single cocktail than Emily made in a week. She stood near the service entrance with a tray of champagne glasses, trying to blend into the marble pillars and golden wallpaper, trying to be invisible the way poor people learned to be invisible in spaces like this. But tonight, she couldn't afford to be invisible. $1,000, Vanessa Sinclair had said 20 minutes earlier, her red lips curling into something that might have been a smile if smiles weren't supposed to have warmth in them. Cash, right now. All you have to do is walk up to Lucas Blackwood and kiss him, in front of everyone. Emily had stared at the stack of bills Vanessa held out like bait. 10 crisp hundreds. More money than she'd seen in months. That's it? Emily had asked, knowing it couldn't be that simple. Nothing was ever that simple. That's it? Vanessa's smile widened. Just a kiss. Public. Humiliating for him, profitable for you. Do we have a deal? Emily should have walked away. Should have told this woman with her diamond earrings and her cruel eyes to find someone else to do her dirty work. But the eviction notice was tucked in Emily's bag, and her brother's medical bills were stacked on her kitchen counter at home, and she was so goddamn tired of drowning. So she'd said yes. Now she was standing across the ballroom from Lucas Blackwood, and her heart was trying to climb out of her throat. He stood near the main bar, surrounded by men in expensive suits who laughed too loud at things that probably weren't funny. Lucas himself wasn't laughing. He held a glass of whiskey. Neat, Emily noticed, because of course a man like him wouldn't dilute anything, and his eyes scanned the room with the expression of someone who'd been to 1,000 parties exactly like this one and found them all equally tedious. Lucas Blackwood, 32 years old, billionaire, CEO of Blackwood Industries, which apparently did something important with technology and acquisitions that Emily didn't understand and couldn't afford to care about. The man was everywhere in New York, on magazine covers, in financial news, on the sides of buildings his company owned, and he was beautiful in that specific way. Powerful men were beautiful. Not pretty. Not soft. His face was all sharp angles and dark eyes, black hair styled just messy enough to look accidental, a jaw that could cut glass. He wore his tuxedo like armor, like he'd been born in it. Emily hated him on principle. She hated all of them. These people who threw parties that cost more than her annual rent, who sipped champagne while people like her worked 3 jobs just to keep the electricity on. She hated that Vanessa Sinclair knew Emily was desperate enough to do this. Hated that Vanessa was right. But mostly, right now, Emily hated that her hands wouldn't stop shaking. You look lost. Emily jerked her head around. A waiter, older, kind eyes, was standing next to her with his own tray of drinks. First time working an event like this? He asked. Emily managed a weak smile. That obvious? You've got the look. He nodded toward the crowd. Like you're waiting for someone to figure out you don't belong here. Don't worry. These people don't actually see us. We're furniture to them. He meant it as comfort. It just made Emily's stomach turn. She watched Lucas Blackwood laugh, actually laugh, at something one of his companions said, and the sound carried across the room. It was a nice laugh, real, the kind that made you want to know what the joke was. Emily gripped her empty tray tighter. Just walk up there. Kiss him. Take the money. Leave. Simple. Except her feet wouldn't move. You okay? The waiter asked. Yeah. Emily forced herself to breathe. Just nervous. You'll be fine. These events always feel overwhelming at first, but I have to go, Emily interrupted, because if she didn't do this now, she never would. She set down her tray, smoothed her simple black dress, the nicest thing she owned, which still looked like garbage compared to what everyone else was wearing. Vanessa was watching from across the room, one perfectly sculpted eyebrow raised in challenge. Emily started walking. The crowd seemed to part around her without anyone actually moving. She caught fragments of conversations, stocks, mergers, someone's vacation home in the Hamptons. The chandeliers overhead were so bright they made her eyes hurt. The floor was polished marble, and Emily's worn heels clicked against it with each step, too loud, too obvious. Lucas Blackwood didn't notice her approaching. Why would he? She was nobody. Just another server in a sea of people paid to make his evening comfortable. She was 3 feet away when one of his companions, a silver-haired man with a senator's smile, glanced at her. His expression flickered with confusion. Guests didn't walk up to Lucas Blackwood uninvited. Staff definitely didn't. "Excuse me," the man started, but Emily was already moving. She grabbed Lucas Blackwood's arm. He turned, startled, whiskey glass still raised halfway to his mouth. Up close, he was taller than she'd expected. His eyes were dark brown, almost black, and they locked onto hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Can I help you?" His voice was deep, controlled, with just enough edge to remind her exactly who she was dealing with. Emily didn't let herself think, didn't let herself hesitate. She rose up on her toes, grabbed the lapels of his tuxedo jacket, and kissed him. For exactly 2 seconds, Lucas Blackwood went completely still. The ballroom around them didn't go silent all at once. It happened in waves. The people closest to them stopped talking first, then the ones behind them, then everyone else as heads turned and whispers started spreading like wildfire. Emily's lips were pressed against his, and she could feel how rigid he'd gone, could sense the shock rolling off him in waves. This was it. He'd push her away. Security would drag her out. She'd grab the money from Vanessa and disappear into the New York night and try to forget this ever happened. But then Lucas Blackwood's hand came up to her waist, and he kissed her back. Not gently, not carefully. He dropped the whiskey glass. Emily heard it hit the floor, heard the crystal shatter, and his other hand tangled in her hair, tilting her head back as he deepened the kiss with a hunger that sent shockwaves straight through her entire body. This wasn't part of the plan. Emily made a sound, surprise, panic, something, against his mouth, but Lucas didn't let go. His fingers tightened in her hair. His arm locked around her waist, and he kissed her like he was drowning and she was air, like they weren't standing in a ballroom full of New York's wealthiest elite, like nothing else in the world existed except this. Someone gasped. Someone else laughed nervously. Emily's hands were still gripping his jacket, but now she didn't know if she was trying to push him away or pull him closer. Her heart was slamming against her ribs. Lucas tasted like expensive whiskey and something darker, something that made her head spin. When he finally pulled back, slowly, reluctantly, the entire ballroom was staring. Lucas's eyes bore into hers. His hand was still tangled in her hair, his thumb brushing against her jaw with shocking gentleness. "Who are you?" he asked quietly. Emily couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The heat of his body against hers, the way he was looking at her like she'd just set his entire world on fire. Her voice came out broken. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to—" "You didn't mean to kiss me?" One corner of his mouth lifted. Not quite a smile. Something more dangerous. That was fairly intentional? It was a mistake. Emily tried to step back, but his arm was still around her waist, solid as steel. "Please, I need to—" "Lucas." The voice cut through the moment like a knife. A woman in a silver gown was approaching, her expression carefully blank in that way people practiced when they were furious but too well-bred to show it. "Catherine?" Lucas's tone went flat. He released Emily so suddenly she almost stumbled. "I didn't realize you'd be here. Clearly." Catherine's eyes flicked to Emily with barely concealed contempt. "Should I assume this is a friend of yours?" Something like that. Lucas straightened his jacket, and just like that, the heat was gone from his expression. He was back to being the untouchable billionaire, and Emily was just a girl who'd made a catastrophic error in judgment. Emily took her chance. She turned and pushed through the crowd, ignoring the whispers, ignoring the way people stared. Her face was burning, her lips still tingled. She needed to get out of here, needed to find Vanessa, get her money, and— A hand caught her wrist. Emily spun around. Lucas had followed her, leaving Catherine and his companions behind. The crowd parted for him automatically. Wait, he said. I can't. Emily tried to pull free, but his grip was firm without being painful. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have done that. Just let me go. What's your name? It doesn't matter. It matters to me. Emily finally yanked her hand free. Why? So you can have security throw me out? Consider it done. I'm leaving. She made it another 10 steps before she heard him call after her. At least tell me why. Emily stopped. She shouldn't engage, shouldn't turn around, but something in his voice made her pause. When she looked back, Lucas Blackwood stood in the middle of the ballroom with everyone watching, and he looked lost. Just for a second. Just long enough for Emily to see past the billionaire armor to something raw underneath. Someone paid me, Emily said, and hated how small her voice sounded. $1,000 to walk up and kiss you in front of everyone. I'm sorry, I needed the money. She didn't wait for his reaction, didn't want to see the anger or disgust or whatever came next. She turned and walked straight toward the exit, her vision blurring with tears she refused to let fall until she was outside. The cold March air hit her like a slap when she pushed through the hotel doors. Manhattan stretched out around her, lights and traffic and 8 million people who had no idea that Emily Carter had just destroyed her own life for $1,000. Except when she looked around for Vanessa, the woman was gone. No money, no payment, nothing. Emily stood on the sidewalk outside the Ashford Hotel and started laughing, because what else was there to do? She'd humiliated herself and Lucas Blackwood in front of New York's elite for absolutely nothing. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You actually did it. Pathetic. Did you really think I'd pay you? Enjoy the consequences. Emily stared at the message until her vision went blurry again. Then she started walking. She didn't know where she was going, didn't care. Her apartment was 40 blocks north, but she couldn't face it yet. Couldn't face the eviction notice, or her brother's worried questions, or the reality that she'd just torpedoed what little stability she had left for a prank that hadn't even paid out. She walked for hours. By the time Emily finally made it home, it was past midnight. The building was quiet, the stairs creaking under her feet as she climbed to the 3rd floor. Her hands shook as she unlocked the door. Em? Her brother's voice came from the living room. 17-year-old Danny was curled up on their threadbare couch with textbooks spread around him, trying to study despite the exhaustion written across his face. You're home late, he said, looking up. Then his expression changed. What happened? Nothing. Emily dropped her bag and kicked off her heels. Just a long night. You look like you've been crying. I'm fine. I said I'm fine. The words came out sharper than she intended. Danny flinched and guilt crashed over her immediately. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to snap. I'm just tired. Danny watched her with those 2 old eyes that kids got when they'd been through hell. Their parents had died in a car accident 3 years ago, leaving Emily to raise him at 27. Then Danny got sick. Leukemia. The treatments were working, but the bills were astronomical, and Emily's 3 jobs still weren't enough. Did something happen at the event? Danny asked quietly. Emily thought about Lucas Blackwood's hand in her hair, his mouth on hers, the way the entire ballroom had gone silent. Thought about Vanessa Sinclair's cruel smile and the text message still burning in her phone. No, she lied. Just rich people being rich people. Go to bed. You have school tomorrow. So do you. Danny gathered his books. You're working the breakfast shift at the cafe, right? Yeah? Get some sleep, Em. She nodded, but they both knew she wouldn't. Sleep meant time to think, and thinking meant remembering, and Emily couldn't afford to remember the way Lucas Blackwood had looked at her before she'd told him the truth. She waited until Danny's bedroom door closed, then pulled out her phone. 17 missed calls. 12 voicemails. All from numbers she didn't recognize. The first voicemail was from a woman who identified herself as a reporter for the New York Post. Hi, I'm trying to reach Emily Carter. We're running a story about the incident at the Ashford Hotel tonight, and we'd love to get your comment. Please call me back at... Emily deleted it, opened the next one. Absolutely need to speak with you about your relationship with Lucas Blackwood. Delete. Offering an exclusive interview if you're willing to... Delete. She made it through 6 voicemails before her hands started shaking too hard to hold the phone. They knew her name. The press knew her name. Emily opened her laptop, ancient, running on borrowed time, and typed her own name into Google. The first result was from 20 minutes ago. Mystery woman kisses billionaire Lucas Blackwood at charity gala. Who is Emily Carter? Below it, dozens more. Blackwood's secret romance, CEO caught in passionate kiss with unknown woman. Lucas Blackwood finally moving on. Intimate moment shocks Manhattan elite. Emily clicked the first article with trembling fingers. There was a photo. Someone had taken a photo of the kiss. Lucas's hand was in her hair, her fingers clutching his jacket, and the image captured the exact moment before everything fell apart. They looked like lovers, like they'd done this 1,000 times before. The article itself was worse. Lucas Blackwood, 32, CEO of Blackwood Industries and one of New York's most eligible bachelors, was photographed in an intimate embrace with an unidentified woman at the annual Ashford Children's Hospital charity gala last night. Sources at the event described the moment as shocking and completely unexpected, with Blackwood, known for his private nature and devotion to his 6-year-old daughter, publicly displaying affection in a way he hasn't since the death of his wife 4 years ago. The woman has been identified as Emily Carter, 30, who appears to have been working as service staff at the event. Her connection to Blackwood is currently unknown, though witnesses report the kiss appeared mutual and intensely passionate. Blackwood's representatives have not yet commented on the incident. Emily closed the laptop before she could read any more. 6-year-old daughter, wife who died 4 years ago. Lucas Blackwood wasn't just a billionaire, he was a widowed father, and she'd kissed him in front of everyone as part of some socialite's revenge scheme without knowing anything about him. Her phone buzzed again. Another unknown number, she turned it off. The apartment was too quiet, too small. The walls felt like they were closing in, and Emily couldn't breathe, couldn't think past the rising panic in her chest. She'd ruined everything. Her face would be in every tabloid by morning. The cafe would probably fire her. They couldn't afford the publicity. The hospital would see the articles and assume she had money now, would come after her harder for Danny's bills. And Lucas Blackwood. Emily pressed her hands against her face and tried not to cry. She failed. The next morning came too fast and hurt too much. Emily dragged herself to the cafe at 5:30 a.m., running on 2 hours of fitful sleep and pure spite. Her manager, Rita, took one look at her and frowned. "You okay, honey?" "Fine." Emily tied on her apron with shaking fingers. "Just tired." "You look awful." "Thanks, Rita. Really needed that today." Rita's expression softened. "I saw the news." Emily went very still. "What?" "The articles. About you and that billionaire." Rita lowered her voice even though they were alone in the cafe. What the hell happened?" "It was a mistake." Emily busied herself wiping down the counter that was already clean. "Someone paid me to do it as a prank. I was stupid. It's over." "Honey, your face is on the front page of the Post." Emily's stomach dropped. "What?" Rita pulled out her phone and showed her. Sure enough, there was the photo. Emily and Lucas, frozen in that perfect, terrible moment, plastered across the tabloid's front page with the headline, "Who is she? Billionaire Dad. Lucas Blackwood's mystery woman revealed." "I need this job, Rita." Emily's voice cracked. "Please don't fire me. I know this looks bad, but I swear it won't affect the cafe. Nobody's going to care in a few days and—" "Fire you?" You've worked here for 3 years without calling in sick once. I'm not firing you." Rita squeezed her shoulder. "But you need to be prepared. This might get messy." She had no idea how right she was. The breakfast rush started at 7. By 7:15, there were reporters outside. Emily saw them through the cafe windows. 3 people with cameras and microphones, waiting like vultures. One of them spotted her and raised his camera. "Back door," Rita said immediately. "Now." "I can't just leave." "Yes, you can. I've got this. Go home, Em. Take the day." Emily wanted to argue, but another reporter joined the group outside and panic won. She grabbed her bag and fled through the back exit into the alley behind the cafe. She made it half a block before someone called her name. Emily Carter." A young woman in a blazer jogged toward her, phone already recording. "Just a few questions about your relationship with Lucas Blackwood." "I don't have a relationship with him." Emily walked faster. But the photos? It was a mistake. Leave me alone. Is it true someone paid you to kiss him? Our sources say. Emily broke into a run. She didn't stop until she was 6 blocks away, ducked into a bodega she'd never been to before, breathing hard and trying not to throw up. The elderly Korean man behind the counter looked at her with concern. You okay, miss? Fine. Emily wiped her eyes. Sorry, I'm fine. She bought a coffee she didn't want and sat in the back corner until her hand stopped shaking. Her phone, turned back on out of necessity, was exploding with notifications. More calls, more voicemails, text messages from numbers she didn't recognize, some offering money for interviews, others calling her terrible names. One message stood out. It was from her landlord. Emily, I saw the news. We need to talk about your lease. She stared at the message until the words stopped making sense. This was happening. Her entire life was imploding because of one stupid, desperate decision, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. Her phone rang. Another unknown number. Against her better judgment, Emily answered. Ms. Carter? The voice was female, professional, unfamiliar. My name is Andrea Chen. I'm calling on behalf of Lucas Blackwood. Emily's heart stopped. What? Mr. Blackwood would like to meet with you. Today, if possible. No. Tell him I'm sorry, but I can't. Ms. Carter, I understand this situation is overwhelming, but Mr. Blackwood is prepared to help you manage the media attention if you're willing to speak with him. Privately. He wants to help me? Emily laughed, and it came out slightly hysterical. Why would he want to help me? I humiliated him. That's something you'll need to discuss with him directly. Andrea's tone remained perfectly neutral. There's a car outside the bodega where you're currently sitting, black SUV. The driver will bring you to Mr. Blackwood's office whenever you're ready. Emily looked out the window. Sure enough, there was a black SUV parked across the street, windows tinted, looking like something out of a spy movie. How did you know where I was? Mr. Blackwood has excellent security, for your protection as much as anything else. That's creepy. That's thorough. Andrea paused. Ms. Carter, the press isn't going to leave you alone. They're going to follow you, harass you, dig into every aspect of your life until they find something interesting or get bored. Mr. Blackwood can make that stop, but only if you agree to meet with him. Emily closed her eyes. She was trapped, completely, utterly trapped, between the media circus outside and the billionaire she'd kissed for money. If I say yes, she said slowly, this doesn't mean I owe him anything. Mr. Blackwood isn't expecting anything except a conversation. Fine. Emily stood up, legs unsteady. I'll meet with him. The driver will be waiting. Andrea hung up. Emily walked outside and crossed the street to the SUV, half expecting this to be some elaborate setup. But the back door opened and a professional-looking driver nodded at her. Miss Carter, please. She got in. The interior was leather and luxury, so far removed from Emily's normal life that it felt like stepping into a different universe. The driver pulled into traffic without a word, and Emily watched Manhattan slide past the tinted windows while her heart tried to beat its way out of her chest. 20 minutes later, they pulled up to a building in Midtown, all glass and steel, with Blackwood Industries etched across the front in letters taller than Emily. The driver opened her door. 40th floor. Ms. Chen will meet you at the elevator. Emily stepped out onto the sidewalk and immediately wanted to run. This was a mistake. All of this was a mistake. She should have stayed home, should have ignored the phone call, should have... Ms. Carter! Andrea Chen stood in the building's lobby. Early 30s, perfectly tailored suit, the kind of competence that came from years of managing impossible situations. Follow me, please. The elevator ride to the 40th floor lasted an eternity. Andrea didn't speak, and Emily was too nervous to try. The walls were mirrors, and Emily caught sight of herself. Rumpled clothes, dark circles under her eyes, hair that desperately needed washing. She looked like exactly what she was, a poor girl way out of her depth. The elevator doors opened directly into a reception area that probably cost more than Emily's entire building. This way. Andrea led her through a hallway lined with abstract art that Emily was pretty sure was supposed to be meaningful, past assistants who glanced up curiously to a set of double doors at the end. Andrea knocked once, then opened them without waiting for an answer. Mr. Blackwood, Miss Carter is here. Emily stepped inside and her breath caught. The office was enormous. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan, minimalist furniture that probably cost six figures, and standing behind a desk large enough to land a plane on was Lucas Blackwood. He looked different in daylight, tired. His suit was perfect, his expression controlled, but there were shadows under his eyes that matched Emily's. "Thank you, Andrea," he said without looking away from Emily. "We'll need privacy." Andrea left, closing the doors behind her with a soft click. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Lucas said very quietly, "Why did you really do it?" Emily's hands clenched into fists at her sides. "I told you. Someone paid me." Vanessa Sinclair. It wasn't a question. Emily nodded anyway. "And you needed the money badly enough to humiliate both of us in public." His voice was still quiet, still controlled, but there was an edge underneath that made Emily's skin prickle. "Yes." "Why?" "Does it matter?" "To me? Yes." Emily met his eyes, those dark, unreadable eyes that had haunted her dreams, and something in her chest cracked open. "My brother is sick," she heard herself say. "Leukemia. The treatments are working, but the bills are... I'm drowning. I work 3 jobs and it's not enough. My landlord is threatening to evict us. The hospital keeps calling. I can't..." Her voice broke. "I can't keep him alive and keep us housed and keep myself together. And Vanessa offered me $1,000 to kiss you. So I did. I'm sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I'm sorry." Silence. Lucas walked around his desk slowly, and Emily fought the urge to back away. He stopped a few feet from her, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something expensive and cedar dark. "You have nothing to apologize for," he said. Emily blinked. "What?" "Vanessa Sinclair has been trying to destroy me for years. She used you as a weapon because she knew I'd respond exactly the way I did." His jaw tightened. "The person who owes you an apology is me. You didn't do anything wrong. I kissed you back." Lucas's eyes searched hers. "In front of everyone, without thinking about the consequences for you, and now your life is falling apart because of it. That's not your fault, isn't it?" He reached up like he was going to touch her face, then stopped himself. "I could have pushed you away. Should have. Instead, He trailed off, something unreadable flickering across his expression. Emily's heart was racing. "Instead, you what?" Lucas looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, "Instead, I forgot where I was. Forgot who was watching. For the first time in 4 years, I felt something other than grief, and I didn't want to let go." The words hung in the air between them, raw and honest and terrifying. Emily couldn't breathe. "Mr. Blackwood?" "Lucas." His voice went soft. "Call me Lucas." "Lucas?" His name felt strange in her mouth. Intimate. "What do you want from me?" "Nothing you're not willing to give." He stepped back, putting distance between them again, and Emily could see the walls going back up. "But I can help you. With the medical bills, the eviction, the media, all of it. If you'll let me." "Why would you do that?" "Because Vanessa used you to hurt me, and I won't let her win." Lucas returned to his desk, all business now. "Also because I don't like seeing people suffer when I can prevent it. I don't need charity. It's not charity, it's..." He hesitated. "Call it reparations. For dragging you into my mess." Emily wanted to refuse, wanted to tell him to keep his money and his guilt and his complicated feelings. But Danny's face flashed through her mind, pale and tired, trying so hard to be brave. And pride was a luxury she couldn't afford. "What's the catch?" she asked. Lucas almost smiled. "Smart. The catch is that we need to control the narrative before it controls us. The media thinks we're having some kind of secret romance. If we deny it now, they'll dig deeper, make it worse. But if we give them a story they can accept..." Understanding dawned cold and sick in Emily's stomach. "You want to fake a relationship. I want to let them think what they're already thinking. You attend a few events with me. We're seen together publicly. In a few months, we have an amicable breakup, and everyone moves on." "That's insane. That's Manhattan." Lucas leaned against his desk. "The alternative is watching the press tear you apart for sport. Trust me, Emily, I've seen what they do to people who don't fit their narrative. It's not pretty." Emily wrapped her arms around herself. And what do I get out of this, besides not being destroyed by the tabloids? I pay off your brother's medical bills, all of them. I pay your rent for the next year, and I make sure you and Danny are protected, security, legal support, whatever you need. It was too much, too generous, too perfect. What do you really want? Emily asked again. Lucas was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, my daughter Sophie is 6 years old. She hasn't seen me smile in 4 years. But last night, after I got home from that party, she asked me who the pretty lady was who made me happy. And I realized, he stopped, jaw working. I realized she doesn't remember what it looks like when I'm not grieving, and that's not fair to her. So this is for your daughter. This is for all of us. Lucas's eyes met hers. You need help. I need to move forward. Sophie needs to see that happiness is still possible. Maybe we can give each other that. Emily thought about Danny, about the bills, about the eviction notice, thought about reporters camped outside her cafe and her landlord's message and the way her entire life had imploded in less than 24 hours. She thought about Lucas Blackwood's hand in her hair and the way he'd kissed her like she mattered. Okay, she said before she could change her mind. I'll do it. Lucas's shoulders relaxed slightly. Thank you. But I have conditions. Name them. Danny doesn't know the truth. As far as he's concerned, Emily couldn't quite say the word. Together. Actually together. I won't lie to him about anything else, but I can't have him worrying that this is fake. Agreed. And when this ends, it ends clean. No drama, no mess. We tell a simple story and walk away. Agreed. And Emily hesitated. I need to know this won't hurt Sophie. If she's going to get attached to me and then I disappear. Sophie is resilient. But Lucas's voice had gone tight. I'll make sure she understands this is temporary. Emily nodded slowly. Then we have a deal. Lucas extended his hand. Emily stared at it for a moment. Strong, elegant, the hand of a man who'd built an empire, before she shook it. His grip was warm, firm. It felt like signing away her soul. I'll have Andrea draw up the paperwork, Lucas said. Non-disclosure agreement, financial arrangements, everything official. You'll move into my penthouse by the end of the week. Emily's eyes went wide. Move in with you? The press needs to believe this is real. That means being seen together, living together. He must have seen the panic on her face because he added, You'll have your own room, your own space, and Danny is welcome, of course. Okay. Emily's head was spinning. Okay. Andrea will handle the logistics. For now, let's get you out of here before the press realizes where you are. He walked her to a private elevator, because of course he had a private elevator, and pressed the button for the parking garage. Emily, Lucas said as the doors started to close. She looked up. Thank you, he said quietly, for agreeing to this. I know it's not ideal. Nothing about this is ideal. Emily managed a weak smile. But I guess we're stuck with each other now. The doors closed on whatever Lucas might have said next. Emily rode down to the garage alone, her hand still tingling from where he'd held it, and wondered what the hell she'd just agreed to. The penthouse was nothing like Emily had imagined, which was stupid because she should have expected exactly this. 40 floors above Manhattan, floor-to-ceiling windows that made the city look like a toy model, furniture that probably cost more than most people's houses. What she hadn't expected was how empty it felt. Lucas gave her the tour himself, which surprised her. She'd assumed he'd hand her off to Andrea or some housekeeper, but instead he walked her through room after room of perfectly designed, barely lived-in space, his hands in his pockets like he didn't quite know what to do with them. Your room, he said, opening a door to a bedroom that was bigger than Emily's entire apartment. Bathrooms through there, closets already stocked. Andrea had someone pull clothes in your size. If anything doesn't fit or you hate it all, just tell her. Emily stepped inside and tried not to visibly panic. The bed was enormous, covered in white linens that looked like they'd never been slept in. Abstract art hung on the walls. Through another door, she could see a bathroom with a tub big enough to swim in. This is too much, she said. It's a guest room. Lucas, I've seen apartments smaller than this bathroom. He almost smiled. Danny's room is next door. I had them set it up with a desk for homework, and there's a gaming system if he wants it. Sophie's room is down the hall. She stays with me Thursday through Sunday every week. Shared custody with my late wife's parents. Emily turned to look at him. You don't have to explain your custody arrangement to me. I know, but you'll meet Sophie tomorrow, and I thought... He trailed off, running a hand through his hair in a gesture that made him look suddenly younger. I thought you should know what you're walking into. A 6-year-old who doesn't remember seeing you happy. Emily repeated his words from earlier, watching his expression tighten. That's what you said. I shouldn't have told you that. Why not? It's the truth, isn't it? Lucas was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Sophie's therapist says she's doing well, adjusting. Kids are resilient. You said that before too, like you're trying to convince yourself. Maybe I am. He met her eyes. Her mother died when she was 2. She doesn't remember Rebecca at all, and sometimes I don't know if that's a blessing or another thing I failed to give her. The raw honesty in his voice made Emily's chest ache. She wanted to say something comforting, something that would ease the pain carved into every line of his face. But what did she know about losing a spouse? About raising a child through grief? I'm sorry, she said quietly. About your wife. Thank you. Lucas stepped back into the hallway. Dinner's at 6:30, casual. Sophie will be here, so... He hesitated. Just be yourself. She's good at spotting fake. Great. No pressure. This time he did smile, just slightly. You kissed me in front of 300 people for money you never got paid. I think you can handle dinner with a first grader. After he left, Emily sat on the edge of the too-big bed and called Danny. Em? Her brother picked up on the first ring. Where are you? Rita said you left work early and you're not answering texts, and I'm fine. I'm sorry. I should have called sooner. Emily took a breath. I'm at Lucas Blackwood's penthouse. Silence. Danny? The billionaire. The one from the photos. Yeah. Em, what the hell is going on? So she told him. Not everything. Not the deal, not the fake relationship, not Vanessa Sinclair's cruel setup. But she told him enough. That she and Lucas had talked. That he wanted to help with the medical bills. That he'd invited her to stay at his place for a while. And yes, it was fast. And yes, it was crazy. But maybe it was also exactly what they needed. Danny listened without interrupting, which meant he was either stunned, speechless, or plotting her murder. So you're dating him, he said finally. Emily's stomach twisted with guilt. It's new. We're figuring it out. He's a billionaire, Em, like actual billionaire, and you're a nobody who works 3 minimum wage jobs? I was going to say you're amazing, and he'd be lucky to have you. Danny's voice went soft. But yeah, also that. The money thing. It's a lot. I know. And you're sure this is real? He's not just... Danny trailed off. You know. Using me? Emily finished. No. He's not like that. She hoped that was true. Lucas had been nothing but straightforward with her, even when the truth made him vulnerable. But Emily had learned the hard way that rich people played by different rules, and desperation made you believe things you shouldn't. When can I meet him? Danny asked. Tomorrow, if you want. He said you could move in too. Your own room, everything. Move in? We've known this guy for like 2 days. I know how it sounds. It sounds insane. Yeah. Emily laughed, and it came out slightly hysterical. It really does, but Danny, he's going to pay off your medical bills, all of them. And I know you're going to say we can't accept that, but we can't accept that. We're drowning. Emily's voice cracked. I'm working myself to death, and it's still not enough. The hospital keeps calling. The landlord wants us out. I can't save you and keep us together, and I'm so tired of failing. You're not failing. Danny sounded close to tears himself. Em, you've given up everything for me. Your whole life, you are my life. You're all I have left. And if Lucas Blackwood wants to help, I'm not too proud to say yes. They were both quiet for a long moment. Okay, Danny said finally. If you trust him, I trust you. But I'm bringing my baseball bat when I move in, just in case. Emily smiled through her tears. Deal! Dinner was a disaster, but not the kind Emily expected. She'd dressed carefully. One of the outfits Andrea had stocked in her closet, nothing too fancy but nice enough that she didn't feel like the help. Lucas had changed into jeans and a sweater, which was somehow more intimidating than the suits because it made him look human and touchable and real. Sophie arrived at 6:15 exactly. Emily heard her before she saw her, small feet running through the penthouse, a child's voice calling, "Daddy!" with unself-conscious joy. Then a tiny tornado burst into the dining room, all dark curls and bright eyes, and launched herself at Lucas with enough force to make him stagger. "Hey, little bit!" Lucas caught her easily, lifting her up like she weighed nothing. "Good day?" "Grandma let me have ice cream for lunch." Sophie grinned, clearly pleased with herself. "Don't tell Grandpa. Your secret's safe with me." Lucas set her down, and that's when Sophie noticed Emily. The little girl went very still, her eyes widening. "Sophie," Lucas said gently, "this is Emily. Remember I told you she'd be joining us for dinner?" Sophie nodded slowly, still staring. Emily crouched down to Sophie's eye level, heart pounding. "Hi, Sophie, it's nice to meet you." "You're the pretty lady from Daddy's phone," Sophie said. Lucas coughed. "I showed her the photo from the gala. I thought it would be better if she knew beforehand." "The one where you're kissing?" Sophie tilted her head. "Are you Daddy's girlfriend now?" Emily's mouth went dry. She glanced at Lucas, who looked equally panicked. "We're friends," Emily managed. "Getting to know each other." "But you kissed him." "I did." "So you like him?" "Sophie," Lucas warned gently. "What?" "I'm just asking." Sophie turned her attention back to Emily, studying her with the intense focus only children could manage. "Do you like pizza?" The subject change was so abrupt Emily almost laughed. "Yeah, I like pizza." "Good. Daddy always orders the boring kind with just cheese. We need someone on our side who likes pepperoni." "I like pepperoni." Sophie's face lit up. "See, Daddy? Emily gets it." Lucas shook his head, but he was smiling, actually smiling, warm and real. "I'm outnumbered, fine. Pepperoni it is." Dinner was chaos in the best way. Sophie talked non-stop, jumping from topic to topic with the logic of a 6-year-old who'd discovered an audience. She told Emily about her school, her best friend Maya, the turtle she wanted but Grandma said was too much responsibility, her favorite color, purple, obviously, and approximately 15 other things without pausing for breath. Lucas watched his daughter with something close to wonder, like he was seeing her for the first time in years. "Emily," Sophie said suddenly, pointing her pizza crust at her, "can you do a cartwheel?" Probably not without breaking something." "I can do 3 in a row. Want to see?" "Sophie, not in the house," Lucas said automatically. "But Daddy, outside on the terrace, after dinner, if Emily wants to." Sophie turned pleading eyes on Emily. "Do you want to see?" "Absolutely," Emily said, meaning it. After dinner, Sophie dragged Emily outside to the massive terrace while Lucas cleaned up. The city spread out below them, lights beginning to sparkle as dusk settled over Manhattan. Sophie did exactly 3 cartwheels, slightly wobbly but triumphant. Then she flopped down on one of the outdoor couches and patted the seat next to her. "Daddy seems happy," she said as Emily sat down. "Yeah? He's been sad for a really long time, since before I can remember." Sophie swung her legs, not quite reaching the ground. "Grandma says he loved my mommy so much that when she died, part of him died too." Emily's throat tightened. "That must be hard to understand." "I don't remember her. Mommy, I mean." Sophie looked up at the darkening sky. "Sometimes I feel bad about that. Like I should remember, but I don't." "That's not your fault, Sophie." "I know. My therapist says the same thing." She said it so matter-of-factly, like having a therapist was the most normal thing in the world. "Do you think Daddy likes you?" The question caught Emily off guard. I don't know. Maybe. He does. I can tell." Sophie leaned against Emily's side, warm and trusting. "You make him smile different, not the fake smile he does for Grandma and Grandpa. A real one." Emily didn't know what to say to that. Didn't know how to explain to this sweet, perceptive child that the smiles were part of a performance, that Emily was here because of a deal, that none of this was quite real. So instead she said, "Your dad loves you a lot. You know that, right?" "Duh," Sophie grinned. "He's the best daddy in the whole world, even when he orders boring pizza." Lucas found them like that 20 minutes later, Sophie half asleep against Emily's shoulder, Emily staring out at the city and wondering how everything had gotten so complicated so fast. "Bedtime, little bit," Lucas said softly. Sophie groaned but didn't argue. She gave Emily a sleepy hug before taking her father's hand and shuffling inside. Emily stayed on the terrace, breathing in the cool night air, trying to remember why she'd agreed to this. The money, yes, Danny's medical bills. But sitting here with Sophie's innocent questions still ringing in her ears, Emily realized she'd underestimated how hard it would be to fake feelings when a child's heart was involved. She likes you. Emily turned. Lucas stood in the doorway, hands in his pockets again, watching her with an expression she couldn't read. She's a good kid, Emily said. She is. Lucas stepped onto the terrace. I'm sorry if she asked uncomfortable questions. Sophie's at that age where she doesn't understand filters yet. It's fine. She just wanted to know if you like me. Emily tried to smile. I told her maybe. Maybe, Lucas repeated quietly. He moved to stand beside her at the railing, close enough that Emily could feel the warmth of him in the evening chill. That's diplomatic. What would you have said? He was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the city. I don't know, he admitted finally. A week ago, I would have said I was incapable of liking anyone that way. That part of me died with Rebecca, and I was fine with that. Better to be alone than to risk feeling that kind of loss again. And now? Lucas turned to look at her, and the intensity in his eyes made Emily's breath catch. Now I'm standing here wondering if maybe I was wrong, he said, about being fine with being alone, about being incapable of feeling anything. Lucas, I'm not expecting anything from you. He said it quickly, like he needed to get the words out before he lost his nerve. This arrangement we have, I know what it is. But I need you to understand that when I kissed you at that gala, it wasn't just shock or instinct. For the first time in 4 years, I felt like I could breathe again. And I know that's not fair to put on you, but stop. Emily held up a hand, heart racing. You can't say things like that. Why not? Because this isn't real. We have a deal. A business arrangement. And if you start confusing that with actual feelings, someone's going to get hurt. You're right. Lucas stepped back, and Emily hated the loss of his warmth immediately. I'm sorry. That was inappropriate. It's fine. Just let's keep this simple, for Sophie's sake, if nothing else. Simple, Lucas echoed. Right. He went back inside, and Emily stayed on the terrace alone, trying to ignore the fact that her hands were shaking and her heart was doing complicated things it had no business doing for a man she barely knew. The next 2 weeks fell into a rhythm that almost felt normal. Danny moved in, suspicious at first but gradually warming up when it became clear Lucas wasn't some controlling billionaire stereotype. The penthouse was big enough that they could all have their own space, and Lucas made a point of treating Danny like a person, not a charity case. They talked about basketball, debated movies, and Lucas even helped Danny with calculus homework one evening, which Emily found absurdly attractive and immediately tried not to think about. The media attention intensified rather than faded. Paparazzi followed Emily everywhere, to the cafe, to the grocery store, to Danny's school pickup. Lucas had assigned her a security guard named Marcus, who was built like a tank and had the personality of a teddy bear. He kept the photographers at a reasonable distance, but they were always there, cameras ready, hungry for the next shot. Emily and Lucas played their roles perfectly. Coffee runs where they held hands for the cameras. A lunch date at a trendy bistro where Lucas pulled out her chair and looked at her like she mattered. A charity function where Emily wore a dress that cost more than her old monthly rent, and Lucas kept his hand on the small of her back all evening, solid and steady. It should have felt fake. Should have felt like acting. But sometimes, when Lucas laughed at something she said, or when his fingers intertwined with hers felt less like performance and more like comfort, Emily forgot they were pretending. That was dangerous. You're getting too close, Rita warned one afternoon at the cafe. Emily had gone back to work despite Lucas's offer to support her financially. She needed something that felt real, something that was hers. I see the way you look at him. I don't look at him anyway. Honey, I've known you for 3 years. You look at that man like he hung the moon. That's just for the cameras. Rita raised an eyebrow. There are no cameras in here. Emily focused on wiping down the espresso machine. It's complicated. Rich men always are. Rita's voice went gentle. Just be careful, Em. People like him, they live in a different world. And when this ends, I know, Emily interrupted. Trust me, I know. But did she? Because every day it got harder to remember that this had an expiration date. that Lucas's kindness was part of their agreement, not actual affection, that Sophie's hugs and Danny's laughter and the way Lucas said her name like it meant something were all temporary. The first crack appeared on a Thursday evening. Sophie was at the penthouse, curled up between Emily and Lucas on the couch, watching some animated movie about talking animals. Danny had claimed the other couch with a bowl of popcorn. It was domestic and comfortable and everything Emily had never let herself want. Then Lucas's phone rang. He glanced at the screen and his entire body went rigid. "I need to take this." He disappeared into his office and Emily tried to focus on the movie, but she could hear his raised voice through the door. Not the words, just the tone. Angry, frustrated, hurt. When he came back 20 minutes later, his face was carefully blank. "Everything okay?" Emily asked quietly while Sophie was distracted by the movie. "Fine, just business." "Lucas, I said it's fine." His tone was sharp enough to cut, and Emily flinched. Sophie noticed. She looked between them, worry creasing her small face. "Daddy?" Lucas's expression immediately softened. "Sorry, little bit. Just a stressful call. Nothing for you to worry about." But Sophie was worrying. Emily could see it in the way she curled tighter into herself, in the tension in her small shoulders. This was what happened when Lucas shut down. His daughter absorbed his pain like a sponge. After the movie ended and Sophie went to bed, Emily found Lucas on the terrace. He was standing at the railing, shoulders tight, staring at nothing. "Want to talk about it?" she asked. "No." "Lucas, Rebecca's parents." He said it flatly, still not looking at her. "They think I'm moving on too fast. That bringing you into Sophie's life is reckless. That I'm dishonoring Rebecca's memory." Emily's stomach sank. "What did you tell them?" "That my personal life is none of their business. That they have Sophie 4 days a week, and they don't get to dictate what happens during my time." Lucas finally turned, and the pain in his eyes was devastating. "They threatened to petition for full custody." "They can't do that." "They can try. Rebecca's father is a lawyer, a good one. And I'm the emotionally damaged widower who's apparently replacing his daughter's mother with some woman he met 2 weeks ago." The words hit like a slap. "Is that how you see me? Some woman?" "No, that's how they see you." Lucas ran his hands through his hair, frustration bleeding through every line of his body. "They see a gold digger, a poor girl chasing a rich man. They don't know about our arrangement, and I can't tell them, because that would make everything worse. So what do? We prove them wrong." Lucas's jaw tightened. "We show everyone, the grandparents, the media, the entire city, that this is real, that you're not some temporary distraction, that Sophie is happy and safe and exactly where she should be. By lying more convincingly? By making them believe it." Emily wrapped her arms around herself. "And how do we do that?" Lucas looked at her for a long moment, something complicated moving through his expression. "By stopping halfway," he said quietly. "By actually trying. By letting this be something more than just a transaction." "Lucas, that's not what we agreed to." "I know." He stepped closer and Emily's heart started racing. "But maybe we agreed to the wrong thing. Maybe we were both too scared to admit that this could be real if we let it." "You don't know me. Not really. I know you work yourself to exhaustion for your brother. I know you're kind to Sophie even when you don't have to be. I know you make terrible coffee and you stress organize when you're nervous and you haven't had a full night's sleep in years." Lucas reached up, hesitating, then gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "I know more about you than I've bothered to learn about anyone in 4 years." Emily couldn't breathe. His hand was still near her face, warm and careful, and she could feel herself leaning into it. "This is a bad idea," she whispered. "Probably. We're going to hurt each other. Maybe," his thumb brushed her cheek, "or maybe we'll figure out how to be happy again. Both of us." Emily should have stepped back, should have reminded him about boundaries, about the deal, about all the reasons this was dangerous. But she was so tired of being alone, so tired of pretending she didn't feel something every time Lucas looked at her like she was the only person in the room. "I don't know how to do this," she admitted. "Neither do I." Lucas smiled slightly. "We'll figure it out together." He leaned in slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. Emily didn't move, couldn't move. When his lips met hers, Gentle this time, instead of desperate. Something in her chest cracked wide open. This kiss was nothing like the one at the gala. That had been performance and shock and adrenaline. This was real. Soft and searching, like Lucas was asking a question he didn't know how to voice. Emily answered by wrapping her arms around his neck and kissing him back. They broke apart slowly, foreheads resting together, both breathing hard. "We're idiots," Emily said. "Complete idiots," Lucas agreed. "This is going to get so messy." "Absolutely." He kissed her again, quick and sweet. Worth it, though. Emily wanted to believe him, wanted to believe they could make this work, that she wasn't just another chapter in his grief, that he wasn't just a fantasy she'd confused with real life. But when she pulled back and saw the hope in his eyes, real hope, fragile and terrifying, she realized she was already in too deep to walk away. The next morning, Emily woke up to her phone exploding. 53 missed calls, 112 text messages, emails from reporters, from old acquaintances she hadn't spoken to in years, from random people who'd found her contact information somehow. She opened the first news notification with trembling hands. Gold digger exposed. Emily Carter's criminal past revealed. The article was brutal. Someone had dug up everything. The time she'd been arrested for shoplifting at 19, charges dropped. She'd been desperate and stupid. An old eviction notice, her brother's medical records, which should have been private. How the hell did they get those? Interviews with her former landlord calling her difficult and always behind on rent. They'd made her sound like a con artist, a manipulative woman preying on a grieving widower for his money. Emily read the entire thing with numb horror, then clicked on the next article. And the next. They all said the same thing in slightly different words. She was using Lucas, corrupting Sophie, dishonoring Rebecca's memory. The comment section was worse. "She's trash. Blackwood can do so much better." Poor Sophie. Imagine having this woman as a mother figure. "How much do you want to bet she'll be pregnant within 6 months?" Classic gold digger move. Emily barely made it to the bathroom before she threw up. Lucas found her 20 minutes later, still sitting on the bathroom floor, phone clutched in her shaking hands. "Emily." He crouched beside her, his voice sharp with concern. "What happened?" She handed him her phone wordlessly. She watched his expression go from confused to furious as he read, his jaw tightening with each paragraph. "This is Vanessa," he said finally. "She's the only one who would have access to some of this information. She must have been digging into your background since the gala. They know about my arrest, about Danny's medical records." Emily's voice came out broken. "They're making me sound like a criminal. You were 19 and desperate. That's not who you are. It doesn't matter what's true. It matters what they believe." She pulled her knees to her chest. "Rebecca's parents are going to use this, aren't they, in the custody case?" Lucas went very still. "Probably." "Then we're done. This arrangement, this whole thing, it's over. I can't be the reason you lose your daughter." "You're not. Lucas, read the articles. I'm exactly the reason. They're calling me a criminal, a gold digger, a bad influence on Sophie." Tears were streaming down her face now, and she didn't have the energy to stop them. "I should never have agreed to this. I should have just stayed in my lane." "Don't." Lucas reached for her hands, gripping them tightly. "Don't you dare blame yourself for Vanessa's cruelty, for the media's lies." "But they're not all lies, are they? I was arrested. I am poor. I do need your money." Emily laughed bitterly. "Maybe I am exactly what they're saying. You're a woman who's been fighting impossible odds your entire adult life and somehow still manages to be kind. That's what you are." Lucas pulled her closer, and Emily didn't have the strength to resist. "And I'm not letting Vanessa destroy that. Not letting her destroy us." "There is no us. Not really. Isn't there?" Lucas tilted her chin up, forcing her to meet his eyes. "Because last night felt pretty real to me. Last night was a mistake." "Was it?" His voice went soft. "Because I haven't stopped thinking about it, about you, about what it would mean to actually try this for real." Emily wanted to believe him, wanted to lean into the warmth of his arms and pretend the world outside didn't exist. But Sophie's face flashed through her mind, sweet, trusting Sophie who deserved better than a stand-in mother with a criminal record and a trail of media destruction. "I need to leave," Emily whispered. "No." "Lucas?" "No." He said it firmly, no room for argument. You're not running away because some vindictive woman planted lies in the press. We fight back. How? By telling the truth. Lucas stood, pulling Emily up with him. By showing everyone exactly who you are. Not the narrative Vanessa's selling, the real you. And who is that? A woman who sacrificed everything for her brother, who treats my daughter with genuine kindness, who makes me want to be better than the broken man I've been for 4 years. Lucas cupped her face in his hands. That's who I see. And that's who everyone else is going to see, too. Emily closed her eyes, letting herself have this moment, letting herself believe just for a second that love and truth could win against money and power and carefully constructed lies. Okay, she said finally. Okay, tell me what to do. Lucas smiled, fierce and determined. We start by releasing a statement, then we go on the offensive, and we show Vanessa Sinclair exactly what happens when she messes with my family. The word hung in the air between them, family. Emily's heart did something painful and hopeful at the same time, and she realized with terrifying clarity that she'd fallen for Lucas Blackwood somewhere between the fake smiles and the real kisses, between protecting her heart and losing it completely. This was going to end badly, but maybe, just maybe, it would be worth it. The press conference was Lucas's idea, and Emily hated every second of it. She sat beside him at a table in the Blackwood Industries conference room, facing a wall of cameras and reporters who looked at her like she was something they'd scraped off their shoes. Andrea had coached her for 2 hours that morning on what to say, how to sit, where to look. Don't fidget, don't cry, don't show weakness. Emily felt like she was drowning in front of an audience. Lucas's hand found hers under the table, warm and steady. He didn't look at her, but his fingers tightened around hers in a silent message. I'm here. You're not alone. Thank you all for coming, Lucas began, his voice carrying the same controlled authority he used in boardrooms. I'm aware of the recent articles concerning Emily Carter and her relationship with my family. I'm here today to address those allegations directly. A reporter in the front row raised her hand immediately. Mr. Blackwood, are you denying that Miss Carter has a criminal record? I'm denying that a single shoplifting charge from over a decade ago, charges that were dropped, I might add, defines who Emily is as a person. Lucas's tone could have cut glass. What defines her is that she's been supporting her younger brother through a serious illness while working multiple jobs. That she's shown my daughter more genuine kindness in 3 weeks than most people show in a lifetime. That she's exactly the kind of person I want in my life and in Sophie's life. Another reporter jumped in. But sir, critics are saying this relationship is moving too fast, that you're dishonoring your late wife's memory. My late wife would want me to be happy. Lucas's voice went tight. Rebecca spent her final days making me promise not to shut myself off from the world, to live, to be a good father to Sophie. And for 4 years, I failed at that promise, until I met Emily. Emily's throat closed up. This was the first time she'd heard him talk about Rebecca publicly, and the raw honesty in his voice was almost unbearable. Miss Carter, a different reporter focused on Emily now. You were working as service staff at the gala where you met Mr. Blackwood. Some are questioning your motives for pursuing this relationship. What do you say to those accusations? Emily's prepared speech evaporated from her mind. Andrea's coaching disappeared. She looked at the sea of skeptical faces and realized that nothing she said would matter. They'd already decided who she was. But Lucas was watching her now, his dark eyes steady and sure, and Emily remembered what he'd said. Show them who you really are. I say they're probably right to question it, Emily said, and felt Andrea stiffen beside her. If I were watching this from the outside, I'd think the same thing. Poor girl meets rich guy. Suddenly she's living in a penthouse. It looks bad. I get it. The reporters leaned forward, smelling blood. But here's what you don't see in those articles, Emily continued. You don't see that I fought Lucas on every bit of help he offered, that I went back to work even though I didn't have to, that I'm terrified every single day that I'm going to mess this up and hurt the people I care about. Her voice cracked. You don't see that falling for Lucas Blackwood was the last thing I wanted to do, because people like me don't get happy endings with people like him. But I did it anyway. And maybe that makes me stupid or naive, but it doesn't make me a gold digger. Boy. Silence fell over the room. Lucas's hand tightened around hers again. And when Emily glanced at him, his expression was soft with something that looked dangerously close to love. "Are you saying you're in love with Mr. Blackwood?" someone called out. Emily's heart stopped. This was it. The moment where she either committed to the lie completely or destroyed everything they'd built. She looked at Lucas. He was watching her with barely controlled tension, waiting for her answer like it mattered more than anything else in the world. "Yes," Emily said quietly. "I'm in love with him." The room erupted. Reporters shouted questions over each other, cameras flashed, and Andrea started calling for order. But Emily couldn't hear any of it over the roaring in her ears, because she'd just told the truth. Somewhere between the fake dates and the real kisses, between Sophie's hugs and Lucas's quiet confessions on the terrace, Emily had fallen completely, irrevocably in love with a man who was supposed to be temporary. Lucas stood abruptly. "That's all the time we have. Thank you." He pulled Emily up and out of the conference room, Andrea running interference behind them. They made it to Lucas's private office before Emily's legs gave out. "Did I just ruin everything?" she asked, leaning against his desk. "No." Lucas closed the door, shutting out the chaos. "You just saved it. By telling them I'm in love with you? Lucas, that's true?" He stepped closer, and Emily's breath caught. "Because it sounded pretty damn true to me. It wasn't supposed to happen. I know. This was supposed to be fake, a deal, business." "I know," Lucas said again, softer this time. He reached up to cup her face, thumb brushing away a tear Emily hadn't realized she'd shed. "But somewhere along the way, it stopped being fake for me too." Emily closed her eyes. "This is such a bad idea." "The worst." He kissed her forehead, gentle and devastating. "But I don't care anymore. I'm tired of pretending, tired of holding back. I want this to be real, Emily, all of it. What if it doesn't work? What if we crash and burn and Sophie gets hurt and then we'll figure it out?" Lucas pulled her against his chest, and Emily let herself sink into his warmth. "Together, like we've been doing all along." Emily wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that love could be enough against all the obstacles stacked against them. But the weight of the world outside this office, the press, the grandparents, Vanessa's vindictive games, felt crushing. "They're still going to come after us," she whispered against his shirt. "Let them try." That night, Emily couldn't sleep. She lay in her too-big bed staring at the ceiling, replaying the press conference in her mind. The confession, Lucas's reaction, the reporter's frenzied questions. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text from an unknown number. "Touching performance today. Almost believed it myself. But we both know how this ends. You'll destroy him just like you destroy everything else." Emily stared at the message, ice spreading through her veins. Another text came through immediately. "How's your brother doing, by the way? Would be a shame if something happened to interrupt his treatments." Her hands started shaking. This wasn't just media games anymore. This was a direct threat. Emily was out of bed and halfway down the hall before she consciously decided to move. She knocked on Lucas's bedroom door, heart hammering. "Come in." Lucas was sitting up in bed with his laptop, still working despite the late hour. When he saw her face, he immediately set it aside. "What happened?" Emily showed him the texts. The temperature in the room dropped about 20 degrees. Lucas read the messages twice, his expression going darker with each word. "She threatened Danny," Emily said, voice shaking. "Lucas, if she goes after him?" "She won't." Lucas was already reaching for his phone. "I'm calling security. Marcus will stay with Danny around the clock. I'll have someone at the hospital too, monitoring his treatments." "This is insane. We need to go to the police." "And tell them what? That someone sent anonymous threatening texts? They won't do anything without proof." Lucas made 3 calls in rapid succession, his voice clipped and commanding. Then he turned back to Emily. "But my security team will. And my investigators. If Vanessa Sinclair thinks she can threaten my family and walk away clean, she's about to learn exactly how wrong she is." The word again, family. Emily wrapped her arms around herself. "I shouldn't have done the press conference, shouldn't have said any of that. I just made everything worse." "You told the truth. That's never wrong. It is when the truth puts people in danger." Tears were threatening again, and Emily was so tired of crying. "Maybe I should just leave. Go back to my old apartment, stay away from you and Sophie, let this all blow over?" "No." Lucas stood, closing the distance between them in 2 strides. Running away doesn't make you safe, it just makes you alone, and I'm not letting you face this alone. Why not? It would be easier for you, for Sophie. You could tell everyone we broke up that I was exactly what they said, and I'd be lying. Lucas gripped her shoulders, forcing her to look at him. Emily, I meant what I said earlier. This stopped being fake for me weeks ago. Maybe the moment you kissed me at that gala and I kissed you back like my life depended on it. I don't know when it happened, just that it did. And I'm not walking away from that because some vindictive woman is playing games. It's not a game when she's threatening Danny, which is why we're going to end this, permanently. Something dangerous flickered in Lucas's eyes. I've been playing defense this whole time, being careful, protecting my reputation and Sophie's stability, but Vanessa just crossed a line and now the gloves come off. Emily had seen Lucas in business mode before, commanding, powerful, untouchable. But this was different. This was personal. And it was terrifying how much she wanted to let him fight this battle for her. What are you going to do? She asked. What I should have done years ago, destroy her completely. The next morning brought unexpected backup. Emily was drinking coffee in the kitchen when Danny appeared, already dressed for school, looking more determined than she'd seen him in months. I'm doing an interview, he announced. Emily nearly dropped her mug. What? With that reporter from the Times, the one who keeps calling. Danny grabbed a bagel from the counter. I'm going to tell them the truth about you, about everything you've done for me, how you're not some gold digger, you're just my sister who's been keeping me alive. Danny, no, you don't need to get involved in this mess. I'm already involved. You're getting death threats because you fell in love with someone, and that's insane. Danny's voice cracked. Let me help, Em, please. Lucas appeared in the doorway. He's right. You're supposed to be on my side, Emily said. I am on your side, which is why I think Danny's interview is a good idea. Lucas poured himself coffee, perfectly calm. The press has been painting you as this manipulative villain, but they haven't heard from the person who knows you best, who's seen you sacrifice everything without asking for anything in return. Emily looked between them, her little brother who wasn't so little anymore, and the man who'd somehow become her entire world in less than a month. Fine, she said finally, but Danny, you have to be careful. They're going to ask intrusive questions about your illness, about our parents, about... I can handle it. Danny hugged her quickly. Trust me, okay? The interview ran 2 days later. Emily read it with her heart in her throat, sitting on the terrace while Lucas worked in his office and Sophie was at school. The sister behind the headlines, Danny Carter speaks out. My sister Emily has worked 3 jobs for the past 3 years to keep me alive. 17-year-old Danny Carter tells me over coffee near his Manhattan high school. She was 27 when our parents died and I got sick. She could have put me in foster care, could have focused on her own life. Instead, she gave up everything, college, friends, any chance at a normal life, to be my parent and my caretaker and my entire support system. Carter's voice is steady, but his hands shake slightly as he continues. So when I see articles calling her a gold digger or saying she's using Lucas Blackwood, I want to laugh. Because Emily doesn't use people. She saves them. She saved me. And honestly, I think she saved Lucas too. I've seen them together. That's not fake. That's just 2 people who needed each other and were brave enough to admit it. The article continued with details about Emily's jobs, the mounting medical bills, the eviction notices. Danny had laid their entire life bare with brutal honesty, and by the end, Emily was crying too hard to read the last paragraph. Her phone rang. Lucas. Did you see it? He asked. Yeah. Emily, you raised an incredible kid. He raised himself. I just kept him fed. Emily wiped her eyes. Is this going to help? It already is. The response has been overwhelmingly positive. People are calling out the original articles, demanding apologies. Vanessa's narrative is falling apart. Good. Emily took a shaky breath. That's good. There's something else. Lucas's tone shifted. My investigators found something. Can you come to my office? 20 minutes later, Emily sat across from Lucas's desk while he slid a folder toward her. Vanessa Sinclair's company has been under investigation by the SEC for 6 months, Lucas said. Fraud, embezzlement, insider trading. She's been using shell corporations to hide assets and manipulate stock prices. Emily opened the folder, scanning documents she barely understood. How does this help us? Because her vendetta against me isn't just personal spite. It's strategic. Lucas pulled out another document. Vanessa's been shorting Blackwood Industries stock. Every scandal involving me drives my company's value down, which makes her money. She wasn't trying to hurt me for revenge. She was trying to profit from it. That's illegal. Extremely. And now the SEC knows about it. Lucas leaned back in his chair, satisfaction crossing his face. By Monday, Vanessa Sinclair will be facing federal charges. Her company will collapse, and her ability to hurt anyone, especially you and Danny, ends permanently. Emily should have felt relieved, vindicated, but all she felt was tired. She's still going to fight, Emily said quietly. People like her always do. They don't just give up because they got caught. Let her fight. She's already lost. But Lucas was wrong. Vanessa Sinclair didn't go quietly. The news of her impending indictment broke on Sunday evening. By Monday morning, she'd released a statement claiming Lucas had fabricated the evidence against her, that he was using his wealth and power to silence a woman who dared to expose his relationship with a con artist. The media ate it up. Suddenly, the narrative wasn't vindictive socialite gets what she deserves. It was powerful billionaire crushes female business owner who threatened his image. Emily watched it unfold on the news with growing horror. She's spinning this, she said, making herself the victim. Lucas stood beside her, jaw tight, as he watched Vanessa's lawyer give an impassioned interview about corporate bullying and gendered double standards. It won't work, he said, but he sounded less certain than before. It got worse. That afternoon, Rebecca's parents filed for emergency custody of Sophie, citing the toxic environment Lucas had created by bringing Emily into their granddaughter's life. The court documents were brutal, painting Lucas as an unstable widower manipulated by a younger woman with questionable morals, claiming Sophie had become withdrawn and anxious since Emily moved in. Lucas read the filing in silence, his face going completely blank. Emily recognized that look by now. It was the one he wore when he was one bad moment away from breaking. "They're using my dead wife against me," he said quietly, "using her memory to take my daughter. Lucas, they're claiming Rebecca would be ashamed of me, that I've dishonored everything she stood for." His hands were shaking. Maybe they're right. "Don't." Emily grabbed his hand, stopping their trembling. "Don't let them do this to you. Rebecca made you promise to live, to be happy. You told me that yourself. And look what that promise has cost." Lucas pulled away, pacing to the window. "Sophie's caught in a custody battle. You're getting death threats. My company's stock is tanking. Maybe loving me is just destructive." Emily's heart cracked. "You don't mean that." "Don't I?" He turned to face her, and the pain in his eyes was devastating. "Everyone I love ends up hurt. Rebecca died. Sophie grew up without a mother, and now you—" His voice broke. "You're being torn apart because I was selfish enough to want you in my life. I chose this. I chose you. You chose survival, a deal, not this nightmare. You're wrong." Emily crossed the room until she was standing right in front of him. "I chose you at that press conference when I told the world I loved you. I chose you every morning I woke up in this penthouse and decided to stay. I'm choosing you right now, even when you're trying to push me away because you think it'll keep me safe." Lucas looked at her like she was breaking his heart and healing it at the same time. "I can't lose Sophie," he whispered. "She's all I have left of Rebecca. If they take her—" "They won't." Emily took his face in her hands. "We won't let them. But you can't fall apart now, Lucas. Sophie needs you strong. She needs you fighting." "I don't know if I can do this." "Yes, you do. You've been fighting for 4 years. You can fight a little longer." He kissed her then, desperate and clinging, like she was the only thing keeping him standing. Emily kissed him back with everything she had, pouring 4 years of his grief and her exhaustion and their impossible hope into the space between them. When they broke apart, Lucas rested his forehead against hers. "Thank you," he breathed, "for not giving up on me." Never. The custody hearing was scheduled for Friday. Emily spent the week preparing with Lucas's lawyers, answering questions about her background, her relationship with Sophie, her intentions with Lucas. They were professional and kind, but Emily could see the worry in their eyes. Rebecca's parents had money and connections and a sympathetic narrative. Lucas had scandal and bad press, and a girlfriend the world thought was a gold digger. The odds weren't good. Sophie came home on Thursday evening for what might be her last visit before the hearing. She ran to Lucas like always, but Emily noticed the shadows under her eyes, the way she clung a little tighter. "Grandma and Grandpa say I might be staying with them all the time now," Sophie said at dinner, pushing pasta around her plate. "They say it's because you're too busy with work and Emily to take care of me properly." Lucas's fork clattered against his plate. "Sophie, that's not true. You're the most important thing in my life. Always." "Then why are they saying it?" "Because—" Lucas looked helplessly at Emily. "How did you explain vindictive grandparents to a 6-year-old?" "Because adults are complicated and stupid sometimes," Emily said gently. "Your grandparents love you very much. So does your dad. They're just disagreeing about what's best for you." "What do you think is best for me?" Sophie asked. Emily's throat tightened. "I think you should be wherever you're happiest, wherever you feel safe and loved." "I'm happy here." Sophie's voice went small. "With you and Daddy and Danny, I don't want to leave." Lucas stood abruptly and left the room. Emily heard his office door close with controlled precision. "Is Daddy mad at me?" Sophie whispered. "No, baby. He's just scared. We all are." "Of what?" "Of losing you. Of losing everything that makes this feel like home. Of things changing," Emily said instead. "But whatever happens, your dad loves you so much. Remember that, okay?" Sophie nodded, but tears were sliding down her cheeks. Emily pulled her into a hug and held on tight, wishing she could promise this little girl that everything would be okay. But she'd learned the hard way that some promises were impossible to keep. That night, Emily found Lucas on the terrace again. He was drinking scotch straight from the bottle, staring at the city like it held answers it would never give up. "You're supposed to be the responsible one," Emily said softly. "Responsible went out the window about 3 weeks ago." Lucas took another drink. "The moment I kissed you back at that gala, I stopped being responsible. Falling in love isn't irresponsible. It is when you have a daughter to protect." He finally looked at her. "Sophie told me earlier that if the judge asks her where she wants to live, she's going to say here, with me, with you." Emily's heart clenched. "That's good, isn't it?" "It's terrifying, because what if it's not enough? What if the judge decides Sophie's word doesn't matter compared to her grandparents' wealth and stability?" Lucas's voice cracked. "What if I lose her because I was selfish enough to want you? Then we fight harder. We show that judge exactly how loved Sophie is here. How happy." "With you?" Lucas set down the bottle. "Emily, if you testify tomorrow, they're going to eviscerate you on the stand. Vanessa's lawyers have probably fed Rebecca's attorneys everything they've got. Your arrest record, your financial situation, every mistake you've ever made. They'll make you look unfit to be around a child." "I know. You could walk away, right now. Tell the court we broke up, that it was just a fling. It would strengthen my case, show that I chose Sophie over a relationship." Emily felt something cold settle in her chest. "Is that what you want?" "No." The word came out broken. "But I want Sophie more. And if losing you means keeping her, then—" "Stop!" Emily grabbed the scotch bottle before Lucas could reach for it again. "You're not losing anyone, not me, not Sophie. We're going into that courtroom tomorrow and we're telling the truth. All of it." "The truth might not be enough." "Then we make it enough." Emily took his hands. "Lucas, I love you. I love Sophie. And I'm not walking away from this family just because things got hard. So tomorrow, you're going to stand up and fight for your daughter, and I'm going to stand beside you, together, like we promised." Lucas looked at her for a long moment, something fragile and desperate moving through his expression. Then he pulled her into his arms and held on like she was the only thing keeping him from falling apart. "I don't deserve you," he whispered against her hair. "Probably not." Emily smiled despite everything. "Lucky for you, I'm not going anywhere." The courtroom was smaller than Emily expected and somehow more terrifying because of it. She sat in the gallery behind Lucas's legal team while Rebecca's parents sat on the opposite side with their lawyers. Margaret and David Whitmore looked exactly like their reputation. Wealthy, refined, and absolutely convinced of their righteousness. Margaret kept glancing at Emily with barely concealed contempt. Sophie was in a private room with a court-appointed child advocate, waiting to speak with the judge separately. The thought of that little girl trying to explain her feelings to a stranger made Emily's stomach turn. All rise. Judge Patricia Hendricks entered. 50s, sharp eyes, the kind of expression that said she'd heard every manipulation tactic in the book and wasn't impressed by any of them. The hearing began. Rebecca's lawyers went first, painting a picture of a grieving widower who'd lost his way. They brought up Lucas's work hours, his history of depression after Rebecca's death, the fact that he'd moved a virtual stranger into his home within weeks of meeting her. Then they called their first witness. A child psychologist who'd never met Sophie testified about the potential harm of introducing unstable romantic relationships into a grieving child's life. A private investigator detailed Emily's background: the arrest, the evictions, the financial desperation. By lunch, Emily felt like she'd been stripped bare in front of strangers. Lucas's lawyers fought back hard in the afternoon. They called Sophie's actual therapist, who testified that Sophie had shown marked improvement in the past month, more engaged, happier, opening up about her feelings in ways she hadn't before. They called Danny, who explained through tears what Emily had sacrificed to keep him alive, how she'd never once put herself first. They called Rita from the cafe, who talked about Emily's work ethic and kindness. But the most powerful moment came when Lucas took the stand. His lawyer asked him directly, "Mr. Blackwood, do you believe your relationship with Ms. Carter has negatively impacted your daughter?" Lucas looked at the judge, then at Margaret and David, then finally at Emily. "No," he said clearly. "Emily has been the best thing to happen to my family in 4 years. She treats Sophie with genuine affection. She makes my daughter laugh. She reminds both of us that it's possible to be happy again after loss. And if loving her makes me a bad father in your eyes, then I don't want to be the kind of father you approve of." Margaret stood up despite her lawyer's restraining hand. "How dare you dishonor Rebecca's memory like this?" Rebecca made me promise not to shut down." Lucas's voice cut across the courtroom. "Not to let grief consume me, to live fully and love completely and give Sophie the kind of home filled with joy, not just obligation. That's exactly what I'm doing. And I'm sorry if that hurts you, Margaret, but my wife is gone. And I have to live with that every single day. But I also have to keep living for Sophie, for myself, and now for Emily too." The courtroom went silent. Judge Hendricks made a note on her pad. "I'd like to speak with Sophie now, alone." The 15 minutes Sophie spent in the judge's chambers were the longest of Emily's life. She sat in the hallway with Lucas, their hands clasped tight, neither speaking. What was there to say? When Sophie finally emerged, her face was tear-streaked but determined. She walked straight to Lucas and climbed into his lap despite being too big for it. "I told her," Sophie whispered. "I told her, I want to stay with you and Emily." Lucas buried his face in his daughter's hair. Judge Hendricks reconvened court 20 minutes later. "I've reviewed all testimony and evidence," she began. "I've spoken extensively with Sophie, and I've considered what arrangement serves her best interests." Emily couldn't breathe. "While I understand the grandparents' concerns, I see no evidence that Mr. Blackwood is an unfit parent. Sophie is clearly loved, well cared for, and thriving in her current environment. The introduction of Miss Carter into the household appears to have had a positive impact on the child's emotional well-being." Margaret made a choked sound. "Therefore, I'm denying the petition for custody modification. The current arrangement will remain in place with continued monitoring by Sophie's therapist." Judge Hendricks looked directly at Lucas. "Mr. Blackwood, I expect you to continue prioritizing your daughter's well-being above all else, including your romantic relationship." "Of course, Your Honor," Lucas said roughly. "We're done here." The gavel came down. Emily felt Lucas's hand tighten around hers so hard it hurt, but she didn't care. Sophie was crying happy tears and Danny was hugging them both. And for the first time in weeks, Emily let herself believe they might actually survive this. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed immediately. Lucas held Sophie close, shielding her from the cameras, while Marcus cleared a path to the car. But before they could escape, Vanessa Sinclair appeared from the crowd. She looked terrible, makeup smeared, designer suit wrinkled, the polish cracked completely. Federal indictment had apparently taken its toll. "This isn't over," she said, loud enough for the cameras to catch. "You think you've won, Lucas? You've destroyed my life, my company, everything I built." You destroyed yourself. Lucas's voice was cold. I just made sure everyone knew about it. I loved you once. Vanessa's eyes were wild. Did you know that? Years ago, before Rebecca, I thought we had something real. But you never even saw me. Just another business contact, another networking opportunity. Vanessa. And then she came along. Vanessa pointed at Emily. This nobody, this poor little waitress. And suddenly you're capable of love again? Suddenly you're the devoted boyfriend? Her voice broke. What did she have that I didn't? Lucas looked at Vanessa for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was almost gentle. She didn't want anything from me except honesty, he said. No games, no manipulation, just truth. That's what you never understood, Vanessa. Love isn't something you scheme your way into. It just happens. And it happened with Emily because she was real when everyone else around me was performing. Vanessa's face crumpled. Then she turned and disappeared into the crowd. And Emily knew somehow that they'd never see her again. The car ride home was quiet. Sophie fell asleep against Lucas's shoulder, exhausted from the emotional day. Emily held Lucas's free hand and watched Manhattan slide past the windows. Thank you, Lucas said softly. For what? For staying, for fighting, for loving us even when we're a complete disaster. Emily smiled. You're my disaster. Might as well see it through. When they got home, Sophie went straight to bed despite it being only 7 p.m. Danny retreated to his room to call his friends with the good news, and Emily found herself alone with Lucas in the living room, the city twinkling beyond the windows. I meant what I said in court, Lucas said, about you being the best thing to happen to us. I know. And I need you to know that this isn't just about the deal anymore, hasn't been for a long time. I know that too. Emily stepped closer. Lucas, I fell in love with you somewhere between the press conferences and the death threats. Probably around the time you helped Danny with his calculus homework and didn't make him feel stupid for not understanding it immediately. Or maybe when Sophie said you smiled different around me. I don't know exactly when, just that it happened. Lucas cupped her face in his hands. I fell in love with you the moment you told those reporters the truth at the press conference. When you were terrified and brave and completely, devastatingly honest. I looked at you and thought, this woman is going to ruin me in the best possible way. Has it ruined you? Completely. He kissed her softly. And I've never been happier. They stood there in the living room as Manhattan glittered around them. Two people who'd found each other in the worst possible circumstances and somehow made it work anyway. Emily knew the hard parts weren't over. Vanessa might be gone, but the media attention would continue. Rebecca's parents would always carry their resentment. The world would keep questioning whether she deserved Lucas, whether this was real, whether love was enough. But standing in Lucas's arms, with Sophie safe in her bed down the hall, and Danny happy for the first time in years, Emily decided that maybe love didn't have to be enough. Maybe it just had to be real. And this, messy and complicated and absolutely terrifying, was the realest thing she'd ever felt. 3 weeks after the custody hearing, Emily woke up to an empty bed and the smell of burning toast. She found Sophie in the kitchen, standing on a step stool, wielding a spatula like a weapon, while smoke poured from the toaster. Danny was trying to open windows while simultaneously laughing too hard to be helpful. What's happening? Emily asked, still half asleep. We're making you breakfast, Sophie announced proudly, then frowned at the charred bread. But the toast doesn't want to cooperate. I told her medium setting, Danny said. She went with maximum chaos instead. Lucas appeared in the doorway, already dressed for work, coffee in hand. He took in the scene with the practiced calm of a man who'd learned to pick his battles. Sophie, we talked about asking before using the stove. But it's a surprise! For Emily! Sophie's face fell. Are you mad? No, little bit. Just worried about you burning the kitchen down. Lucas kissed the top of her head, then caught Emily's eye over Sophie's curls. The look he gave her was soft and warm and completely devastating in its domesticity. This was the part nobody showed in the tabloids. Not the glamorous galas or the dramatic courtroom battles. Just a Saturday morning with burnt toast and a 6-year-old's good intentions and the quiet, ordinary miracle of family. Emily's chest ached with how much she wanted to keep this forever. After breakfast, scrambled eggs that were only slightly rubbery, and toast that Danny had salvaged, Sophie dragged Emily to her room to show off a painting she'd done at school, It was abstract and enthusiastic, all bright colors and zero regard for staying inside the lines. "It's us," Sophie explained, pointing to 4 stick figures of varying heights. "That's Daddy, that's you, that's me, and that's Danny. We're at the park." Emily studied the painting, throat tight. Sophie had drawn them holding hands in a chain, smiles like upside-down rainbows on their faces. "It's perfect," Emily said. "Mrs. Morrison asked me to draw my family. I told her this is what my family looks like now." Sophie tilted her head. "That's okay, right? That you and Danny are part of it?" Emily pulled Sophie into a hug before the little girl could see her eyes welling up. "That's more than okay, sweetheart." "Good. Because I told Maya at school that I have the best family ever, and she said her family has 2 dogs, which is pretty good too, but I like ours better." Later, while Sophie was occupied with cartoons and Danny had escaped to meet friends, Emily found Lucas in his home office. He was staring at his laptop with the kind of concentration that meant he was either solving a major business crisis or avoiding something he didn't want to think about. "You okay?" Emily asked from the doorway. Lucas looked up, and whatever mask he'd been wearing slipped. "Rebecca's parents want to have dinner. With all of us, including you and Danny." Emily's stomach dropped. "When?" "Next Friday, at their place in Connecticut." Lucas ran a hand through his hair. "They said they want to move forward and establish a better relationship for Sophie's sake." "That sounds suspiciously mature for people who tried to take Sophie away from you 3 weeks ago." "I know. Which is why I'm trying to figure out what they're actually planning." Lucas closed his laptop. "But I also can't say no. If they're genuinely trying, I need to meet them halfway. For Sophie. And if they're not? If this is just another way to prove I'm not good enough?" Lucas stood and crossed to her, gathering her into his arms. "Then we'll deal with it. Together. Like everything else." Emily buried her face in his chest. "I'm terrified of meeting them." "They should be terrified of meeting you. You survived a courtroom interrogation and came out looking like a saint." He kissed her forehead. "You can handle one dinner with judgmental in-laws." "Are they in-laws if we're not married?" The question hung in the air between them. Lucas pulled back slightly, his eyes searching hers with an intensity that made her heart race. "Do you want them to be?" he asked quietly. Emily's breath caught. "Lucas, I'm not proposing. Not yet. Not like this." He cupped her face in his hands. "But Emily, I need you to know that this isn't temporary for me anymore. I'm not thinking in terms of months or convenient arrangements. I'm thinking forever. And if that terrifies you, tell me now, because I'm already in too deep to walk away." "It terrifies me," Emily admitted. "Everything about this terrifies me. The money, the media, the fact that I'm one mistake away from ruining your life. But Lucas, I can't imagine walking away either. You and Sophie and this ridiculous penthouse that still doesn't feel real. You're my family now. And I don't know when that happened, but it did." Lucas kissed her then, slow and thorough, like he had all the time in the world to memorize the taste of her. When they broke apart, he was smiling. "Friday dinner it is," he said. "Let's go be terrified together." The week passed too quickly. Emily stress-bought 3 different outfits before settling on a simple dress that Andrea assured her said, respectful but not trying too hard. Danny borrowed one of Lucas's sport coats and looked so grown up it made Emily want to cry. Sophie wore her favorite purple dress and announced she was bringing her family painting as a gift for Grandma and Grandpa. The drive to Connecticut was tense. Lucas drove with white knuckles, Sophie chattered nervously in the back seat, and Emily tried not to throw up from anxiety. The Whitmore estate was exactly as intimidating as Emily expected. Old money, sprawling grounds, the kind of house that had probably been in the family for generations. A housekeeper answered the door and led them to a formal dining room where Margaret and David waited. Margaret looked older than she had in the courtroom. Tired. David stood when they entered, his expression carefully neutral. "Lucas," he said. "Sophie, darling." Sophie ran to hug them both, and Emily saw Margaret's face soften in a way that made her human instead of just the enemy. "And you must be Emily," Margaret said, extending a hand. "And Daniel." "Danny," her brother corrected quietly. "Just Danny." They sat down to a dinner that was probably delicious but tasted like cardboard in Emily's mouth. Conversation was painfully polite. Questions about Danny's school, Sophie's activities, Lucas's latest business acquisition. Nobody mentioned the custody battle. Nobody acknowledged the elephant in the room. Until dessert. Emily, Margaret said, setting down her coffee cup with deliberate precision, I owe you an apology. The table went silent. I let grief and fear turn me into someone I'm not proud of. Margaret's voice was steady, but her hands trembled slightly. I looked at you and saw a threat to the last piece of my daughter I have left. I convinced myself that protecting Sophie meant removing you from her life. I was wrong. Emily didn't know what to say. She looked at Lucas, who seemed equally stunned. Sophie's therapist has been very clear about the positive changes in her emotional well-being, David added. The increased happiness, the openness. We were prepared to dismiss that as temporary, but we can't ignore it anymore. You're good for her, both of you. He nodded at Danny, too. I don't understand, Lucas said carefully. 3 weeks ago, you were trying to take Sophie from me. Now you're apologizing? 3 weeks ago, I was drowning in grief and looking for someone to blame, Margaret said. But I've been seeing a therapist too. Working through my feelings about losing Rebecca, about watching Sophie grow up without her mother. And I realized I was so focused on preserving Rebecca's memory that I forgot to consider Sophie's present. She looked at Emily directly. You make my granddaughter happy. You make my son-in-law happy. And Rebecca would have wanted that more than anything. Emily felt tears burning behind her eyes. Mrs. Whitmore, Margaret, please, the older woman's voice cracked. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. The things I said about you in court, the investigation into your background, it was cruel and unfair. But if you're willing, I'd like to try to build a relationship. For Sophie's sake. And because anyone Lucas loves this much deserves a chance. Sophie, who'd been unusually quiet, suddenly spoke up. Does this mean we can have Thanksgiving here again? With everyone? Like a real family? Margaret smiled through her tears. I'd like that very much, sweetheart. The rest of dinner was different. Still awkward, still careful, but genuine in a way it hadn't been before. David asked Danny about his health with real concern. Margaret told Emily stories about Rebecca that were warm instead of weaponized. Lucas relaxed incrementally, his hand finding Emily's under the table and holding tight. On the drive home, Sophie fell asleep within 10 minutes. Danny plugged in headphones and closed his eyes. Lucas and Emily sat in the front seat in comfortable silence until Lucas finally spoke. I didn't expect that. Me neither. Emily watched the highway lights blur past. Do you think she meant it, Margaret? Yeah, I do. Lucas glanced at her. Margaret's a lot of things, but she's not a liar. If she says she wants to move forward, she means it. That's terrifying in a completely different way. How so? Because now I have to actually build a relationship with them. Be the person they think I am, not mess this up. Emily's voice went small. What if I'm not good enough? What if... Stop. Lucas reached over and took her hand. You are exactly good enough. You've always been good enough. And Margaret sees that now. Everyone does. Emily wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that this fragile piece they'd built could last. But she'd learned the hard way that happiness was temporary, that the universe had a way of taking away anything you loved too much. 2 weeks later, the universe proved her right. Emily was at the cafe during the morning rush when Rita pulled her aside, face pale. Em, there's someone here asking for you, says it's urgent. Emily looked through the doorway to see a woman in a business suit sitting at a corner table. Not a regular customer. Not press. Something else. I'll take my break, Emily told Rita. The woman stood when Emily approached. Miss Carter, I'm Jennifer Walsh with Child Protective Services. Every nerve in Emily's body went on alert. Is this about Sophie? Because her custody case was already... This is about your brother, Daniel. Jennifer's expression was sympathetic but professional. We've received reports about his living situation. I need to ask you some questions. Emily's blood went cold. What kind of reports? Anonymous tips suggesting Daniel is living in an unstable environment with a man he has no legal relationship to, that his medical care may be compromised, that you're not his legal guardian. Jennifer pulled out a tablet. I need to verify some information. I am his legal guardian. I've been raising him for 3 years since our parents died. I understand, but according to our records, you never filed for formal guardianship. When your parents passed, Daniel was placed in your care as an emergency measure, but the paperwork was never completed. Emily felt the floor drop out from under her. That can't be right. I signed papers at the hospital. You signed temporary custody papers. They expired after 6 months. Legally, Daniel is currently in an undefined situation. Jennifer's voice was gentle but firm, which means we need to conduct a home visit, verify his living conditions, and potentially open a case to establish formal guardianship. This is because I'm with Lucas. Someone reported us because they think I can't discuss the source of the reports. But I can tell you that we take all concerns about minors seriously. I'll need to schedule a home visit within the next week. Emily managed to get Jennifer's card and schedule the visit before her hands started shaking too badly to hold anything. She made it to the bathroom before she broke down completely. This was Vanessa. Had to be. Even facing federal charges, the woman was still finding ways to hurt them. Emily called Lucas from the bathroom floor. Someone called CPS on us, she said without preamble. About Danny. They're saying I'm not his legal guardian, that he's in an unstable situation, and they want to do a home visit. Lucas's response was immediate. I'm calling my lawyers. Don't talk to CPS again without representation. Are you at the cafe? Yeah. Marcus is 5 minutes away. He'll bring you home. Emily, breathe. We'll fix this. But when Emily got home and Lucas's lawyers explained the situation, fixing it wasn't simple. The guardianship paperwork had fallen through cracks in a broken system. With their parents dead and no other family, Emily should have filed for formal adoption or guardianship, but she'd been 27 and terrified and working 3 jobs to keep Danny alive. The hospital social worker had assured her the temporary papers were enough. They weren't. The good news is that establishing legal guardianship now is straightforward, Lucas's family lawyer explained. You're his sister, you've been his primary caregiver for years, and Danny's old enough that his preference will be heavily weighted. The bad news is that CPS is involved now, which means scrutiny. What kind of scrutiny? Emily asked. Home visits, interviews with Danny, background checks. They'll want to verify that he's safe, healthy, and in a stable environment. Given your recent media attention, they may look more closely than usual. Lucas's hand tightened around Emily's. Will the fact that Danny's living with me be a problem? It could be. You're not related to him, and while the living situation is certainly comfortable, CPS may question the appropriateness of a minor living with his sister's boyfriend. Then we fix that too, Lucas said firmly. After the lawyers left, Emily sat on the terrace staring at nothing. Danny was at school, oblivious to the fact that his entire life might be upended again. Sophie was with her grandparents. It was just Emily and Lucas and the weight of impossible choices. I should move out, Emily said quietly. Take Danny back to my old apartment. Show CPS that we're independent, that I can take care of him without your help. Your old apartment was condemned. The building's been sold. Then somewhere else. Anywhere that proves I'm not just using you for... Emily, stop. Lucas knelt in front of her chair. We're not going backwards. We're not pretending you and Danny aren't part of this family just because some anonymous asshole called CPS. But if it hurts the case, then we'll deal with it. But I'm not letting you face this alone. He took her hands. What if there was another option? What option? Lucas was quiet for a long moment, and Emily could see him gathering courage for something. Marry me, he said. Emily's heart stopped. What? Not like this. Not on the terrace with you panicking about CPS. But Emily, if we're married, Danny living here becomes a non-issue. You'd be my wife, Danny would be my brother-in-law, and CPS would have one less thing to question. Lucas's voice went softer. And I know this isn't romantic and the timing is terrible, but I need you to understand that I'm not proposing because of CPS or the lawyers or any of that. I'm proposing because I want you to be my wife. I want to wake up next to you for the rest of my life. I want Sophie to have you as her stepmother, and Danny to actually be part of this family legally and... Stop, Emily interrupted, tears streaming down her face. Just stop. Lucas went pale. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have. Yes. Emily laughed through her tears. Yes, I'll marry you. Not because of CPS or Danny or any practical reason, but because I love you so much it terrifies me, and I want this messy, complicated, ridiculous life we've built together. Lucas stared at her. Yes? Yes, you idiot. Yes. He kissed her then, fierce and relieved, and Emily kissed him back with everything she had. When they broke apart, Lucas was laughing. I had a whole plan. Ring, champagne, probably some dramatic rooftop proposal that Andrea would have coordinated. This was not the plan. Plans are overrated. Emily wiped her eyes. But Lucas, we can't get married just to help the CPS case. We're not. We're getting married because we love each other and want to spend our lives together. The fact that it also helps with CPS is just a bonus. Lucas pulled her to her feet. But we should probably tell Danny before we tell the lawyers. Danny took the news with surprising calm. So let me get this straight, he said, sitting on the couch between Emily and Lucas. You're getting married, which means I get to keep living here, and CPS will back off because Emily will legally be Lucas's wife? That's the basic summary. Yes, Lucas said. Danny looked at Emily. Do you love him? Yes. Does he love you? Yes, Lucas answered. And this isn't just some scheme to fix the CPS thing. I've wanted to marry your sister since about week 2 of knowing her, Lucas admitted. I was just waiting for the right moment. CPS forced my hand. Danny was quiet for a minute, processing. Then he turned to Lucas. If you hurt her, I know where you keep the expensive scotch, and I will pour all of it down the drain. Lucas grinned. Fair enough. Also, I'm walking her down the aisle, non-negotiable. Wouldn't have it any other way. Danny hugged Emily tight. You deserve this, Em. You deserve to be happy. And if Lucas makes you happy, then I'm good with it. The CPS home visit happened 3 days later. Jennifer Walsh arrived with a colleague, both professional and thorough. They toured the penthouse, interviewed Danny privately, reviewed his medical records, and asked Emily approximately 1,000 questions about everything from meal planning to homework supervision to emergency protocols. Through it all, Lucas stayed present, but not overbearing, answering questions when asked, but letting Emily take the lead. Sophie, who'd been briefed carefully about why strangers were asking questions, was on her best behavior, showing the social workers her room and explaining very seriously that Danny helped her with math homework and Emily made the best grilled cheese. After 2 hours, Jennifer pulled Emily aside. I want to be straight with you, Ms. Carter. The anonymous reports we received painted a picture of neglect and instability. What I'm seeing is the opposite. Daniel is healthy, happy, well cared for, and thriving in school. Your relationship with Mr. Blackwood appears stable and positive. The living situation is more than adequate. Emily's legs nearly gave out with relief. So you're closing the case? I'm recommending closure, yes, but you still need to file for formal guardianship. The temporary papers expired years ago, and while it's unlikely anyone would pursue this further, you need the legal protection, especially given your public profile. We're working on it. My lawyer's already filed the paperwork. Jennifer nodded. Good. I'll include that in my report. Ms. Carter, between you and me, whoever called this in was wasting our time. You're doing an excellent job with your brother. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. After the social workers left, Emily collapsed on the couch with Danny and cried from sheer relief. Lucas brought them both water and sat quietly while Emily processed everything. It's over, Danny asked. It's over, Emily confirmed. Good. Because I was preparing a speech about what an amazing sister you are, and I really didn't want to have to give it to strangers. Emily laughed through her tears. You prepared a speech? Marcus helped. He's surprisingly sentimental for a guy who looks like he could bench press a car. That night, after Danny and Sophie were both asleep, Lucas found Emily in the kitchen making tea she didn't really want. You okay? He asked. I don't know. Emily watched the kettle with unfocused eyes. I keep waiting for the next disaster, the next person trying to tear us apart. When does it end, Lucas? Maybe it doesn't. Maybe this is just life now, fighting for what we love, dealing with people who don't understand, surviving one crisis just to face another. He turned her to face him. But we keep surviving, and eventually the good starts outweighing the bad. You really believe that? I have to. Because the alternative is giving up, and I'm not doing that. Not on you, not on us. Lucas pulled a small box from his pocket. I know I already proposed, and I know we agreed to wait for something more romantic. But Emily, I've been carrying this around for a week, and I can't wait anymore. He opened the box to reveal a ring, simple, elegant, a single diamond that caught the kitchen light and turned it into stars. It's too much, Emily whispered. It's not enough. Nothing I could give you would be enough for what you've given me. Lucas took her hand. Emily Carter, you walked into my life for $1,000, you never got paid, and somehow became the reason I remember how to breathe. You love my daughter like she's yours. You make me want to be better than I am. And I know we're doing this backwards and too fast and probably completely wrong by every traditional standard, but I don't care. Marry me. Actually, officially, marry me. Emily looked at the ring, then at Lucas, then at the life they'd built together in this penthouse full of impossible dreams and hard-won happiness. Yes, she said again, because what else was there to say? Lucas slid the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly, like everything else about this relationship that shouldn't have worked but somehow did. They set a date for 6 weeks out, long enough to plan something small and intimate, short enough that they wouldn't lose their nerve. Sophie was appointed flower girl and took her duties very seriously, practicing her petal-tossing technique daily. Danny started growing out his hair for the occasion, claiming he needed to look distinguished for the photos. Margaret and David were invited and accepted with genuine warmth. The media, predictably, lost their minds. Billionaire Blackwood to a wed mystery woman, Emily Carter, in private ceremony. From Kiss Dare to Wedding Vows, the unlikely love story of Lucas Blackwood and Emily Carter. Former service worker to become Mrs. Blackwood, fairy tale or scandal? Emily stopped reading the articles after the third one called her Cinderella. She wasn't Cinderella. She was just a woman who'd gotten lucky enough to fall in love with someone who loved her back, and no fairy tale comparison could capture how terrifying and wonderful and completely ordinary that actually was. The night before the wedding, Emily had dinner with just Danny and Rita at their old cafe. It was Rita's idea, something to ground Emily before she married into a world of wealth and expectations she'd never been prepared for. You ready for this? Rita asked, pouring them all coffee that was definitely too strong for 8 p.m. No, Emily admitted. I'm marrying a billionaire tomorrow. I'm becoming stepmother to a 6-year-old. I still work here 3 days a week because I can't shake the feeling that this is all going to disappear. How could I possibly be ready? You love him? More than I thought I could love anyone. He loves you? Yeah, he does. Rita smiled. Then that's all you need to be ready for. The rest is just noise. Danny reached across the table and took Emily's hand. You know what Mom would say if she were here? That I'm insane? That you deserve every bit of happiness you can grab hold of, and that she's proud of you for being brave enough to try. Danny's voice went thick. I'm proud of you too, Em, for surviving everything and still believing in good things. Emily hugged her brother tight, trying not to cry and failing completely. The wedding was small, just family. Sophie, Danny, Margaret, and David. Andrea, who'd become more friend than assistant. Marcus, who'd kept them all safe. Rita, who'd believed in Emily when no one else did. They held it at sunset on the penthouse terrace, with Manhattan glittering below and fairy lights strung overhead, and Sophie's painting of their family displayed prominently. Emily wore a simple white dress that Andrea had helped her choose. Danny walked her down the makeshift aisle with fierce pride. Sophie scattered petals with such enthusiasm that half of them ended up in Lucas's hair. And Lucas stood at the end of it all in a dark suit, watching Emily approach with an expression that made her forget how to breathe. The ceremony was short. They'd written their own vows, which Emily had been terrified about, but when she looked into Lucas's eyes, the words came easily. I promise to love you even when you're impossible, she said, to remind you that being happy doesn't dishonor the past, to be the best stepmother I can be to Sophie, even though I have no idea what I'm doing most of the time, and to never, ever let you order plain cheese pizza again when pepperoni is clearly superior. Lucas laughed through tears. I promise to never take for granted the gift you've given me, he said, which is hope. The belief that I could survive grief and find joy again, that Sophie could have a complete family, that love doesn't run out just because you've lost it before. His voice broke. Emily, you saved me, and I promise to spend the rest of my life showing you what that means. When the officiant pronounced them married, Lucas kissed her like he'd kissed her that first night at the gala, desperate and sure, like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. Sophie cheered, Danny whistled, Margaret cried openly, and Emily let herself believe finally that this was real, that she got to keep this, that happy endings weren't just for other people. The reception was just dinner on the terrace, casual and warm, but Emily had never been happier. Sophie sat between her and Lucas, talking non-stop about flower girl duties. Danny charmed Margaret with stories about their childhood. Marcus actually smiled, which Andrea claimed was a minor miracle. As the night wound down and the guests started leaving, Emily found herself alone on the terrace with Lucas. Sophie had fallen asleep on the couch inside, and Danny was helping clean up. "Mrs. Blackwood," Lucas said, testing out the name. "Still getting used to that. We have time." He pulled her close, swaying gently to music only they could hear. "About 50 or 60 years if we're lucky." Emily rested her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat. "Think we'll make it that long?" "Absolutely. You're stuck with me now." "Worse fates," Emily murmured. They danced in the fairy lights, while Manhattan sparkled below. Two people who'd found each other in the worst possible circumstances and chosen to build something beautiful anyway. Emily knew there would be more challenges, more scrutiny, more people questioning whether she belonged in Lucas's world, more moments of doubt and fear and uncertainty. But standing in her husband's arms with their family safe inside and the whole city laid out before them, Emily decided that scared didn't mean wrong. Sometimes scared just meant you'd found something worth fighting for. And this, messy and imperfect and absolutely terrifying, was worth every fight. Marriage, Emily discovered, was nothing like the movies made it seem. There was no magical transformation where suddenly everything made sense. She didn't wake up feeling like she belonged in Lucas's world. The penthouse didn't stop feeling too big, too expensive, too much. And the media definitely didn't lose interest just because they'd made it official. What changed was smaller than that, more ordinary. It was Lucas reaching for her hand in the morning without thinking about it. Sophie calling her Emily Mom in that hyphenated way kids did when they were testing out new territory. Danny stealing Lucas's ties for school presentations, and Lucas pretending to be annoyed while secretly pleased. It was family in a way Emily had stopped believing was possible after her parents died. 3 months after the wedding, Emily was folding laundry in the bedroom when Lucas came home early from work. She could tell something was wrong by the way he closed the door, too carefully, like he was trying not to shatter something fragile. "What happened?" she asked. Lucas loosened his tie, staring out at the city. "Vanessa Sinclair took a plea deal today. 5 years federal prison for the fraud charges. Her company's being liquidated. Everything she built is gone." Emily set down the shirt she'd been folding. "You don't sound happy about it." "I'm not unhappy. Justice was served. She can't hurt anyone else. But—" Lucas turned to face her. "She looked broken, Emily. Completely destroyed. And I keep thinking about what she said outside the courthouse, that she loved me once. Do you feel guilty?" "No. Maybe. I don't know." He sat on the edge of the bed, and Emily moved to sit beside him. She made her own choices, chose revenge over moving on, chose to hurt people who didn't deserve it. But there's this part of me that wonders if I could have handled things differently years ago. If I'd been less focused on business, more aware of how my actions affected people. "Lucas, stop." Emily took his hand. "Vanessa didn't go to prison because you were thoughtless. She went because she committed crimes. Blaming yourself for her choices is like blaming me for agreeing to kiss you at that gala. We all make decisions. Some of them are mistakes, but we don't get to use those mistakes as excuses to hurt other people." "When did you get so wise?" "I've always been wise. You just married me for my stunning good looks." Lucas laughed despite everything, pulling her close. "I married you because you're the only person who calls me on my bullshit and makes me want to be better at the same time. Someone has to keep your billionaire ego in check." They sat there in comfortable silence, and Emily thought about Vanessa, about how close she herself had come to making different choices that night at the gala. If the money had actually been paid, if Lucas hadn't kissed her back, if she'd walked away instead of staying to fight. Life turned on such small moments, such fragile decisions. The next crisis came from an unexpected direction. Sophie's school called on a Tuesday afternoon. Emily was at the cafe when her phone rang, Lucas's name on the caller ID. "Sophie's school just contacted me," he said without preamble. "She got in a fight with another student. We need to go pick her up." Emily's heart sank. "A fight? Sophie?" "That's all they'd tell me over the phone. Can you meet me there?" 20 minutes later, they sat in the principal's office while Sophie huddled in a chair, looking small and defiant. The other child, a boy named Tyler from Sophie's class, sat with his mother on the opposite side of the room, sporting a bloody nose. Sophie punched Tyler during recess, Principal Morrison explained. Tyler's mother is understandably upset, and we have a zero-tolerance policy for violence.
He said my family was fake, Sophie burst out, tears streaming down her face. He said Emily's not my real mom, and Danny's not my real brother, and we're all just pretending because my dad is rich. The room went silent. Emily felt like she'd been punched herself. She looked at Tyler's mother, who had the grace to appear uncomfortable. Kids say things, the woman started. I'm sure Tyler didn't mean...
He did mean it, Sophie said fiercely. He's been saying it for weeks, that Emily married my dad for money, that she doesn't really love us, that I should tell the truth about how fake everything is. Lucas's expression had gone dangerously cold. And where exactly would a 7-year-old get those ideas? Tyler's mother shifted. I may have mentioned some concerns about the situation, but I never told Tyler to bully my daughter about her family? Lucas's voice could have frozen fire. To make her feel like the love in her home isn't real? Mr. Blackwood, I understand you're upset, but Sophie still punched my son. Good, Lucas said flatly. Principal Morrison looked startled. Mr. Blackwood, I'm not saying violence is the answer. Sophie will be appropriately disciplined at home. But I'm also not going to punish my daughter for defending her family against bullying that started because adults couldn't keep their opinions to themselves. Lucas stood. If this school can't protect my daughter from that kind of harassment, we'll find one that can. Emily had never loved him more. They took Sophie home early. She was quiet in the car, picking at her sleeves, clearly expecting punishment. Am I in trouble? She asked finally. Lucas glanced at her in the rearview mirror. What do you think? I shouldn't have hit Tyler. Violence is wrong. But I was so mad, Daddy. He keeps saying mean things about Emily, and I told the teacher, but she said to ignore him, and I tried. But today he said Emily was probably going to leave us when she gets bored, and I just... Sophie's voice broke. I couldn't let him say that. Emily turned in her seat to look at Sophie. Sweetheart, I'm not going anywhere. You know that, right? But what if you do? What if Tyler's right, and this is all fake, and one day you wake up and decide being a mom is too hard? Sophie was crying now. What if you leave like my real mom did? Emily's heart shattered. She unbuckled and climbed into the back seat, pulling Sophie into her arms. Your mom didn't leave you, baby. She died. That's completely different. She would have stayed forever if she could have. Emily cupped Sophie's tear-stained face. And I'm choosing to stay. Every single day. Not because your dad is rich or because this penthouse is nice, but because I love you. You and Danny and your dad, you're my family, the real kind, the kind I choose every morning when I wake up. But you're not my real mom. No, I'm not. And I would never try to replace her or make you forget her. Emily wiped Sophie's tears with her thumbs. But I can be another person who loves you completely, who shows up to your school plays and helps with homework and will always, always fight for you, even when it's hard, even when people say mean things. Is that okay? Sophie threw her arms around Emily's neck and cried into her shoulder. I love you, Emily, Mom. I love you too, sweetheart. So much. Lucas had to pull over because he was crying too hard to drive safely. That night, after Sophie was asleep, Emily and Lucas talked about switching schools, about how to protect Sophie from the judgment that came with being Lucas Blackwood's daughter, about whether they'd made the right choice bringing Emily into Sophie's life so publicly. Maybe we should have waited, Lucas said, staring at his untouched scotch. Let things settle before getting married, given Sophie more time to adjust. Or maybe the timing was exactly right, and some people are just cruel no matter what we do. Emily took the glass from his hand and set it aside. Lucas, Sophie punched a kid today because she loves us, because someone tried to tell her our family isn't real and she knew better. That's not a sign we messed up. That's a sign we're doing something right. She's 7 years old and dealing with adult problems because of my choices. She's 7 years old and learning that family is worth fighting for, that love is real even when other people don't understand it. Those aren't bad lessons. Lucas pulled Emily into his lap, burying his face in her neck. How are you always so sure about this? About us? I'm not. I'm terrified most of the time that I'm going to mess everything up. Emily ran her fingers through his hair. But being scared doesn't mean we're wrong. It just means we care enough to worry. I don't deserve you. Lucky for you, love isn't about deserving. It's about showing up anyway. They decided to keep Sophie in her current school, but with additional support. Counseling to help her process the bullying, clear communication with teachers about monitoring the situation, and a very firm conversation with Tyler's mother about acceptable behavior. Emily also started volunteering at the school once a week, partly to keep an eye on Sophie, partly to show the other parents that she wasn't some untouchable billionaire's wife. She was just a person who loved her kid and wanted to be involved. The shift was subtle but noticeable. Other mothers started including her in conversations. Sophie made new friends whose parents didn't judge. And slowly, painfully, Sophie stopped feeling like she had to defend her family's existence. 6 months after the wedding, Danny's leukemia went into full remission. The doctor delivered the news on a routine checkup, and Danny just stared at her like he couldn't process the words. Remission, he repeated. As in, done? No more treatments? We'll continue monitoring, but yes, the cancer is undetectable. You're in remission, Daniel. Emily grabbed her brother and held on while they both cried. Lucas, who'd come to the appointment too, shook the doctor's hand about 15 times and couldn't stop smiling. That night, they had an impromptu celebration at the penthouse. Sophie made a banner that said, Danny wins, in purple marker. Lucas ordered enough takeout to feed 20 people. Margaret and David came over with flowers. Rita closed the cafe early to join them. Danny stood in the middle of the living room, looking overwhelmed and happy, and so young despite everything he'd been through. I want to say something, he announced, and everyone quieted down. 3 years ago, when I got sick, I thought my life was over. I was 14, I just lost my parents, and suddenly I had this disease that might kill me. And he looked at Emily with tears in his eyes. You gave up everything, your whole life, just to keep me alive. Danny, let me finish. Danny smiled. You worked yourself to death, literally. 3 jobs, no sleep, no life of your own. And then Lucas came along, and I was so scared he was going to be just another thing taking you away from me. But instead, he gave us both a family, a real one. The kind that shows up to hospital appointments and celebrates remission and makes everything feel possible again. Lucas's arm tightened around Emily's waist. So thank you, Danny continued, both of you, for fighting for me, for loving me, for making me believe that surviving was worth it. His voice cracked. I'm going to college next year. I'm going to have a life. And that's because of you. There wasn't a dry eye in the room. Later, after everyone had left and Sophie was in bed, Emily found Danny on the terrace. He was taller now, healthier, looking more like their father every day. You okay? She asked. Yeah, just thinking. Danny leaned against the railing. When I got sick, I was so angry. At the universe, at our parents for dying, at my own body for betraying me. I thought if I survived, I'd spend the rest of my life being bitter about what I'd lost. And now? Now, I think maybe losing things is how you figure out what actually matters. Danny looked at her. I lost our parents. Almost lost my life. But I got you, really got you, not just as a sister, but as someone who'd burn the world down to keep me safe. And I got Lucas and Sophie and this weird, wonderful family that doesn't make sense on paper, but works anyway. Emily hugged her brother tight. I'm so proud of you. You know that? I know, but Em? Danny pulled back. You're allowed to live for yourself now, not just for me. You've spent 3 years making sure I survived. Now it's your turn to actually live. The words settled over Emily like a benediction and a challenge. She'd been so focused on survival, Danny's, her own, their fragile families, that she'd forgotten what it meant to actually live. To want things beyond just making it through another day. That night, lying in bed next to Lucas, Emily let herself think about the future for the first time in years. Not in terms of bills or treatments or court battles, but in terms of possibility. What do you want? Lucas asked quietly, like he'd been reading her mind. Not for Danny or Sophie or me, for you. What does Emily Blackwood want out of life? Emily thought about it, really thought about it. I want to finish my degree, she said slowly. I was 2 semesters away from graduating when our parents died and I had to drop out. I want to go back. then go back. And I want to keep working at the cafe, not because I need the money, but because I like it. It's mine. Something I'm good at that has nothing to do with being your wife. Okay. And I want, Emily hesitated. I want to adopt Sophie, legally, not to replace Rebecca, but to make official what already feels true, that she's my daughter too. Lucas went very still. Emily, I know it's complicated, and we'd need Rebecca's parents' blessing, and Sophie would have to want it. But Lucas, when she called me Emily Mom, I realized I want that to be real. All the way real. Lucas rolled over to face her, his eyes bright with unshed tears. I'll talk to Margaret and David. And Sophie. But Emily, if this is what you want, I'll move heaven and earth to make it happen. What about what you want? Lucas smiled. I want exactly this. You, getting your degree and keeping your cafe job and being Sophie's mom and driving me crazy by organizing my office when I'm not looking. I want normal and messy and real. Everything I thought I'd lost when Rebecca died. They talked late into the night about futures and possibilities and all the small dreams that made up a life. And Emily realized that somewhere between the fake relationship and the real marriage, she'd stopped just surviving. She was living. Actually, fully living. The adoption process took 8 months. Margaret and David gave their blessing immediately, which surprised Emily until Margaret explained that they'd been hoping for this. That seeing Sophie with a mother figure who loved her had been healing in ways they hadn't expected. Sophie was asked repeatedly by lawyers and therapists if this was what she wanted. Each time she said yes with increasing exasperation, like the answer was obvious and everyone else was being ridiculous for asking. The final hearing was short. The judge, the same one who'd presided over the custody case, smiled at Emily and Sophie standing together at the front of the courtroom. This is much nicer than the last time I saw you all, Judge Hendricks said. Ms. Blackwood, or should I say Mrs. Blackwood now, do you understand the commitment you're making today? Yes, Your Honor, Emily said clearly. I'm promising to love and protect Sophie for the rest of my life, to be her parent in every way that matters, to show up for her, fight for her, and never let her doubt that she's wanted. And Sophie, do you understand what it means for Emily to adopt you? Sophie nodded seriously. It means she's choosing me, not because she has to, but because she wants to, and that even if things get hard, she's not going to leave. That's exactly right. Judge Hendricks signed the paperwork with a flourish. Then by the power vested in me by the state of New York, I hereby grant this adoption. Congratulations to the Blackwood family. Sophie launched herself at Emily with enough force to nearly knock them both over. Lucas wrapped his arms around them both, and somewhere in the middle of the group hug, Emily started crying happy tears that wouldn't stop. Danny took about 1,000 photos. Margaret wept openly. David shook Lucas's hand with genuine warmth. And for the first time since her parents died, Emily felt like she had a complete family again, different from before, assembled from broken pieces and bad timing and one impulsive kiss at a gala, but real. Chose and fought for, and absolutely, completely real. A year after the wedding, Lucas had a surprise. He blindfolded Emily and drove her to an unknown location while she alternated between excited and mildly concerned about being kidnapped. If you're taking me to some billionaire sex dungeon, I'm filing for divorce, she said. Lucas laughed. Not a sex dungeon, I promise. When he finally removed the blindfold, they were standing in front of a small storefront in a decent neighborhood. The windows were empty, the space clearly vacant. I don't understand, Emily said. You said you wanted something that was yours, something that had nothing to do with being my wife. Lucas handed her a key. It's a cafe. Or it will be. The building's yours. You can do whatever you want with it. Open your own place, expand Rita's business, turn it into something completely different. It's yours, Emily. No strings attached. Emily stared at the key in her hand, then at the empty storefront, then at her husband, who somehow understood her in ways she hadn't understood herself. This is too much. It's not enough. It's never enough. Lucas pulled her close. You've given me everything, Emily. Let me give you something back. Emily opened the cafe 6 months later. It was small and imperfect and absolutely hers. She partnered with Rita, who brought her expertise and regular customers. They hired local kids who needed jobs. kept the coffee strong and the prices reasonable and the atmosphere welcoming. On opening day, Lucas showed up with Sophie and Danny and a ridiculous bouquet of flowers. Margaret and David came. Marcus brought his wife and kids, which was when Emily learned he even had a family. Half the neighborhood stopped by to check out the new place. And Emily stood behind the counter in her apron, making coffee and taking orders and feeling more herself than she had in years. This was what she'd been missing. Not luxury or stability or even love, though all of those mattered, but purpose. The feeling that she was building something, contributing something, existing as more than just someone's wife or sister or mother. She was Emily Blackwood, cafe owner, college student working on her degree part-time, wife to Lucas and mother to Sophie and Danny's sister. All of it at once, all of it real. 2 years after that kiss at the gala, the anniversary of their wedding fell on a Saturday. Emily woke up to Sophie jumping on the bed at dawn, Lucas trying unsuccessfully to stop her, and Danny filming the whole thing from the doorway. "Happy anniversary," Sophie yelled. "We made breakfast." "Well, Danny made breakfast. I mostly supervised." "Supervised is generous," Danny said. "She ate half the bacon before I could stop her." They had breakfast on the terrace. Actually good this time, since Danny had learned to cook from Lucas. The city stretched out below them, and Emily thought about how different her life looked from this view compared to 2 years ago. Then she'd been drowning. Now she was floating. Not perfectly, not without struggles, but alive in a way that mattered. That evening, Lucas arranged for Margaret and David to take Sophie for the night. Danny conveniently had plans with friends, and Lucas took Emily back to the Ashford Hotel, to the same ballroom where they'd first kissed. "This feels like tempting fate," Emily said as they walked in. "Maybe, but I wanted to come back here, to see how far we've come." The ballroom was empty except for them. Lucas must have rented it for the evening, because there was champagne waiting and soft music playing and fairy lights that made everything look magical. "Dance with me?" Lucas asked. Emily stepped into his arms, and they swayed slowly while the ghosts of that first terrible, wonderful night swirled around them. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked quietly. "Kissing me back that night, starting all this chaos?" "Every day," Lucas said, and when Emily pulled back in shock, he smiled. "I regret that I wasted 4 years being miserable before I met you. I regret every moment I didn't have you in my life. But the kiss? Starting this? Never. Not once. Even with all the drama, the media, the custody battle, Vanessa, especially because of all that." Lucas cupped her face gently. "Emily, before you, I was surviving, going through motions, being a father and a CEO, but not really being alive. You reminded me what it felt like to want things, to fight for things, to believe that happiness was possible, even after loss. You did the same for me. Then we're even." They danced until the music stopped, then kept dancing anyway because neither wanted to let go. "I love you," Emily said against his chest. "I know I say it all the time, but I need you to know. Loving you has been the scariest, best decision I've ever made. I love you too, and I need you to know that every day I wake up next to you, I still can't quite believe you're real, that you chose me, that you stayed. Where else would I go? You're my home, Lucas. You and Sophie and Danny and this ridiculous life we've built. I'm not going anywhere." Lucas kissed her then, soft and sweet, and it felt like a promise renewed, like saying yes all over again to everything they'd built and everything they'd become. When they finally pulled apart, Emily looked around the empty ballroom and laughed. "What?" Lucas asked. "I was just thinking, Vanessa Sinclair paid me $1,000 to kiss you. Well, she promised to pay me. And now look at us. Married, happy, raising kids. I should send her a thank you card. That's incredibly inappropriate." "But accurate," Emily grinned. "She tried to destroy you and accidentally gave you exactly what you needed. That's some cosmic justice right there. I prefer to think of it as you being exactly where you were supposed to be that night, and me being brave enough to kiss you back instead of letting you run away. Brave or stupid? Both. Definitely both." They left the ballroom hand in hand, stepping out into the New York night that had witnessed the beginning of their story. The city was alive around them, millions of people living millions of lives, most of them completely ordinary and therefore absolutely extraordinary. Emily thought about the girl she'd been 2 years ago, desperate and drowning and convinced she deserved nothing more than survival. That girl would never have believed this ending, would never have imagined that saying yes to one terrible dare would lead to a family, a home, a life worth living. But that was the thing about life, Emily had learned. It turned on small moments. A kiss at a gala. A billionaire who kissed back. A choice to stay instead of run. A decision to fight for happiness instead of accepting misery. You couldn't predict which moments would change everything. You just had to be brave enough to live them. 3 years after meeting Lucas, Emily graduated with her degree. The ceremony was small, but her entire family showed up. Lucas sat in the front row with Sophie on his lap. Danny cheered so loud when Emily's name was called that several people turned to stare. Margaret and David brought flowers. Rita brought tissues and pride. And Emily walked across that stage with her head high, accepting a diploma she'd fought years to earn, and felt something settle in her chest that had been restless since her parents died. She'd made it. Not just survived, but actually made it. Built a life she was proud of. Became someone her parents would recognize and love. After the ceremony, they had lunch at Emily's cafe. Sophie insisted on serving everyone, even though she could barely carry the plates. Danny talked about his college plans, pre-med, following in no one's footsteps but his own. Margaret told stories about Rebecca that were warm and healing instead of weaponized. And Lucas sat beside Emily with his hand on her knee, watching their family with quiet contentment. "What are you thinking about?" Emily asked him quietly. "That I'm happy. Genuinely, completely happy. For the first time in 5 years. Just happy. That's it? Isn't that enough?" Lucas smiled. "I spent so long chasing success and wealth and all these external validations. But this, sitting in your cafe with our daughter serving slightly burnt pancakes and your brother making terrible medical puns, this is what happiness actually looks like. And it's better than anything I could have built alone." Emily leaned her head on his shoulder. "We built it together." "We did." Sophie appeared at their table with more coffee neither of them had asked for. "Are you guys being sappy again? Because Maya's mom says you're always being sappy, and it's gross but also kind of sweet." "We're being sappy," Emily confirmed. "Deal with it." Sophie rolled her eyes with the dramatic flair only 8-year-olds could manage, but she was smiling. "Fine, but Danny says we're getting ice cream after this, so finish your gross adult feelings fast." After she bounced away, Lucas laughed. "Our daughter is a menace. Our daughter is perfect." That too. They got ice cream. Then they went home to the penthouse that finally felt like home instead of a museum. Sophie did homework while Emily helped. Danny video called friends from college. Lucas worked on his laptop but kept getting distracted by his family. It was ordinary. Beautifully, perfectly ordinary. And that night, after everyone was asleep, Emily stood on the terrace alone and thought about the journey that had brought her here. All the pain and fear and impossible choices. All the moments she'd wanted to give up but kept going anyway. She thought about Vanessa Sinclair serving time for crimes built on bitterness. About Rebecca, whose death had broken Lucas, but whose memory had taught them all that love was worth the risk of loss. About the girl Emily used to be, who'd believed happiness was for other people. And she thought about the $1,000 she'd never been paid for that kiss. How it had seemed like salvation at the time. How losing it had felt like the end of the world. But if she'd gotten that money, she would have run. Would have disappeared into the New York night and never looked back. Would have missed everything that came after. The love, the family, the life she'd built from broken pieces and brave choices. So maybe not getting paid was the best thing that ever happened to her. Lucas found her there, slipping his arms around her waist from behind. "You okay?" he asked. "Better than okay." Emily leaned back into his warmth, just thinking about how different things could have been. If you hadn't kissed me back that night, if I'd run instead of stayed, if we'd given up instead of fought. But we didn't. No, we didn't. Emily turned in his arms. We chose each other every day, even when it was hard, especially when it was hard. Best choice I ever made. Same. They stood there looking out at the city that had witnessed their entire story, from that first disastrous kiss to this moment of hard-won peace. And Emily realized that this was the real ending. Not the wedding or the adoption or any single moment, but this. Choosing to stay, choosing to love, choosing to believe that broken people could build something beautiful together. Years from now, when people asked how they met, Emily would tell them the truth. About the dare, the kiss, the billionaire who'd kissed back. About the fake relationship that became real, about the battles fought and won and the family built from nothing. But the part she'd remember most, the part that would matter when everything else faded, was this. Lucas Blackwood had looked at her when she had nothing to offer except honesty and desperation, and he'd chosen her anyway. Not because she was perfect, not because she fit into his world, but because she was real in a life full of performance, and real was exactly what he'd needed. And Emily had looked at Lucas with all his grief and wealth and complications, and she'd chosen him too. Chosen to stay when running would have been easier. Chosen to fight when surrendering would have hurt less. Chosen to love when fear would have been safer. They'd chosen each other, again and again and again. And that choice, renewed daily in coffee-making mornings and burnt toast disasters and quiet terrace conversations, was worth more than any amount of money could ever buy. Emily Blackwood had walked into a ballroom for $1,000 she'd never received. She'd walked out with everything she'd never known she needed. And she'd learned the most important lesson of all, that love wasn't about deserving or earning or being good enough. It was about being brave enough to try, brave enough to stay, brave enough to believe that happiness was possible even when everything said it wasn't. The poor girl and the billionaire, the kiss that started everything, the family they'd built from chaos and determination. It wasn't a fairy tale. It was better. It was real. And real, Emily had discovered, was the only kind of happy ending worth having.